It's dawn on the 17th of September 2025. Near Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea, the U.S. destroyer USS Higgins suddenly detects multiple unknown vessels closing in. Radar screens light up. Alarms echo across the steel corridors. Sailors sprint to stations, gripping helmets and weapons. Outside, gray silhouettes appear on the horizon. Chinese warships, Coast Guard cutters, and shadowy militia boats pushing closer, boxing the Americans in. Overhead, Philippine surveillance aircraft circle nervously, their radios alive with chatter. The USS Cincinnati moves into position alongside Higgins, its smaller frame braced against a wall of Chinese ships. Every second feels tighter as warnings crackle over loudspeakers. Beijing declares the U.S. ship has trespassed. Washington insists it's a lawful patrol. Between the two, more than a dozen vessels now face off within striking distance. Engines hum at low throttle. Body armor clicks into place. One wrong nudge here and steel will meet steel. The South China Sea is not just blue water. It's a lifeline for global trade tankers, container ships, and fishing fleets moving goods that keep shelves stocked and fuel flowing. On this morning, Scarborough Shoal is the flashpoint. USS Higgins and USS Cincinnati are not here by chance. Their mission is freedom of navigation, to show that no nation can lock down these waters. For Washington, the patrol is routine. For Beijing, it's a test of sovereignty. Chinese warships push close, broadcasting warnings in clipped Mandarin. Coast Guard cutters slice across the Americans' path, backed by swarms of militia boats. Every move is recorded, every signal amplified on state media. In Beijing, this is framed as victory. In Washington, as resolve. For the sailors, none of that matters. They see steel bows less than a football field away. They hear engines rumbling, radios hissing. One wrong maneuver could cause a collision, and a collision could spiral into something worse. Missiles, jets, escalation, no one can fully control. The risk is not abstract. It's inches, seconds, decisions made under stress. Philippine planes circle overhead, feeding radar data into American systems. Manila is caught in the middle, an ally bound by treaty, yet a neighbor under China's shadow. Even with advanced sensors, the balance looks uneven. 2 U.S. ships against more than 10 Chinese vessels. The stakes are huge. If the Americans back down, allies may lose faith. If they push too hard, war looms. Both outcomes ripple beyond this reef-shaping trade, alliances, and U.S. credibility in Asia. That's why Scarborough matters. That's why this patrol feels like more than just another day at sea. This standoff leaves one big question: who should yield? If you believe the U.S. must hold the line, press 1. If you think China has the upper hand, press 9. Let's see where you stand in this clash. 7:15 local time. The tension breaks. On USS Higgins, radar operators call multiple surface tracks shifting speed. Chinese cutters move in pairs, one crossing ahead while another angles to the flank, a box maneuver to trap the target in tight water. Higgins goes to battle stations. SM-2 stay cold by rule, no first shots. Instead, electronic warfare leads. Antennas surge power, jamming Chinese targeting and forcing eyeballs and guesswork. If sensors go blind, collisions are less likely. USS Cincinnati surges into a gap between 2 cutters, blocking the swarm from sealing Higgins in. The LCS water jets bite hard, sliding the trimaran sideways to shoulder a militia boat without contact. Overhead, quadcopters buzz, streaming video to controllers. Higgins' gunners track but hold fire. Spotlights rake the drones to spoil their exposure. At sea level, loudspeakers clash. "You are entering Chinese waters. Leave immediately." The Americans reply, "We are conducting lawful operations in international waters." Scripts repeat, tones harden, steel creeps closer. 5 short blasts from Higgins' horn signal danger under the rules of the road. A militia boat slices across the bow, wake exploding against Higgins' hull. The destroyer answers with a deeper blast and swings a few degrees to open room. 2 more craft surge in, weaving. Higgins fires its water cannon, drenching one hull and forcing it off. Non-lethal, but the line holds. Crash crews stand ready with hoses precaution if sparks fly. Escalation. A Type 54 amperes frigate lights its radar. HHQ-16 cells exposed. Higgins answers by cueing Aegis fire control back a warning that any shot will be met. Cincinnati trains its 57mm gun toward the nearest cutter. C-Ram slews into silent watch. Then a new ploy. A militia boat trails floating line across Cincinnati's path, aiming to foul an intake. The LCS knifes around it, jets reversing to pivot clear, then surges back into the gap. Philippine controllers relay track numbers, helping keep the corridor open. More than a dozen hulls churn the shoal, and every helm order must land clean. From above, the scene is a tightening spiral. White wakes crossing like chalk on slate. Radios crackle with warnings and urgent coordination. Every second stretches thin. One wrong call, and words could become fire. 7:32 local time. The standoff grows heavier. Several Chinese vessels tighten the ring, cutting the water down to narrow channels. Higgins shifts a few degrees, presenting less profile and buying space for defense. Every move is calculated in inches. On the bridge, officers call out bearings. 2 cutters closing. Port side, range 600 yards. The destroyer responds by shifting power to its port, CIWS, the rapid-fire cannon now trained. Cincinnati accelerates, darting between wakes to stop another militia boat from slipping behind Higgins' stern. The smaller ship shudders under sharp turns, but holds its line. Above, Philippine aircraft track the chaos. Controllers feed real-time data into the U.S. network, filling gaps in radar coverage. Their voices mix urgency with caution. Every adjustment must avoid sparking a collision. From their vantage, wakes crisscross like blades. Chinese tactics shift again. Several small boats advance low and fast, using spray-to-mask approach. Higgins' gunners open with warning bursts. Heavy 50 cal tracers arcing bright lines across the sea. 2 boats peel away, but one presses closer. The destroyer fires again, this time forcing it to break off. Non-lethal so far, but each exchange pushes closer to the edge. Then comes the second wave. A cluster of drones streaks low over the water, harder to track than ships. Cincinnati locks its C-Ram system, radar painting the targets. The crew waits, every finger tense. Launch authorization hangs on a knife edge. At the same time, Chinese frigate sensors sweep again, signaling readiness for escalation. The pressure is relentless. For sailors, minutes feel like hours. Sweat drips inside helmets as alarms echo. On every console, screens show red icons inching nearer. Nobody speaks of missiles, but everyone feels the shadow of that word. Still, the U.S. ships hold their ground. They block, maneuver, and counter each probe. Both sides test limits, daring the other to blink first. One mistake, and the clash could ignite the region. Moments like this divide opinion. Should America stand firm, even if risk rises, or step back before sparks fly? If you think they must hold the line, press 1. If you believe China's pressure is breaking through, press 9. Your choice will show how you see this fight. 7:46 local time. Just as the standoff seems locked, a new threat appears. Smaller, faster contacts pop up on radar, hard to track, skimming the surface at high speed. They're not cutters or militia boats. They're unmanned fast craft, likely packed with explosives. The bridge erupts in shouts. Multiple bogeys, closing at 40 knots. The order goes out. Prepare close defense. Higgins pivots to bring its starboard batteries to bear. Cincinnati, more agile, rushes to widen the gap, buying a firing lane. These drones are harder to hit than ships. Their low profile slipping under radar beams until the last moment. Higgins calls in its last line. The close-in weapon system. The white dome on deck that spits hundreds of rounds per second. But the commander knows they can't rely on CIWS alone. He orders the crew to bring C-Ram online as well, creating layered fire. Every second matters. The first swarm closes within 2 miles. Higgins launches flares to break sensors, but the drones keep coming. Water spray trails behind them like knives through the sea. Gunners track through high magnification, thumbs resting on triggers. The ship maneuvers in tight turns, reducing its silhouette, forcing the attackers to adjust course. Cincinnati moves closer, almost side by side, forming a wall. Its 57mm gunfire's warning bursts into the water, sending columns of spray as deterrence. Still, the swarm doesn't slow. If even one makes it through, steel on steel will mean fire and casualties. This is the twist. The fight is no longer ship against ship, but man against machine. The sailors know what's coming is faster, cheaper, and harder to stop. If they fail, the next flash won't just be a warning, it will be the hit nobody survives. 7:58 local time. The swarm is in range. Higgins CIWS roars alive, throwing a river of tracers over the bow. Bright lines rake the sea, smashing one drone then another. Cincinnati's 57mm joins, shells punching white pillars into the onrushing craft. Explosions pepper the surface, spray hanging in the air. But the swarm doesn't break. One drone slips through, skimming fast, closing to half a mile. Alarms howl. Inbound port side. Higgins swings hard to narrow its profile. CIWS rotates, barrels glowing, then fires again. The intruder shatters in a burst of spray, fragments hissing across the waves. Relief lasts seconds. Another wave, 4 drones tight in formation. Cincinnati locks CRAM. Green light, missiles ripple out and tear 2 apart mid-run. Debris falls, but 2 remain. Higgins gunners fire short bursts, tracers walking the water. One drone erupts, the last keeps coming. At 200 yards, it's almost unstoppable. CIWS takes over, deafening bursts tearing the horizon. The drone breaks apart, flaming wreckage tumbling into the sea. The shockwave rattles windows, spray drenches the bow. For a moment, silence, no fresh tracks. The horizon clears, but quiet can be a trap. Damage check. Teams report scorched rails and a dented sensor. Yet propulsion and weapons hold. Helicopters stay lashed down. Electronic warfare floods more noise across the water as decoy rockets kick skyward, hedging against unseen eyes. Cincinnati reloads CRAM. Belts feed the 57mm. On Higgins, loaders jam fresh drums into the CIWS. Palms raw under gloves. The bridge voice stays flat. Maintain spacing. Philippine controllers say the surface picture is thinning. Though a Chinese frigate still prowls outside the shoal, sensors hot. Radios settle to breathing and static. No missiles, no jets, only wind and waves. The Americans hold seaward, daring the ring to close again. This was survival, not victory. Both sides tested, both learned. The next clash will come faster, with sharper teeth. Moments like this force a choice. Should America hold the line, or is China grinding it down? If you back the US, press 1. If you think Beijing's pressure is winning, press 9. Drop your pick in the comments and subscribe to track the next move. 8:20 local time. The shoal is quiet, but the tension remains heavy. Higgins and Cincinnati withdraw slowly, bows pointed outward, still covered by Philippine aircraft. Chinese ships linger just inside the reef, their presence a reminder that nothing has been solved. The result is clear. No missiles fired, no shots exchanged beyond warning bursts, but both sides escalated to the edge. The US proved it could hold ground against overwhelming numbers. China proved it could deploy layers of ships, militia, and drones to pressure even the most advanced American destroyer. Neither side blinked. For Washington, the survival of 2 ships shows resolve but also exposes cost. Each drone destroyed by missiles or CIWS means tens of thousands of dollars against something that costs a fraction. The math favors Beijing. For Beijing, the message is dominance at the shoal. More ships, more persistence, more headlines declaring success. For the Philippines, the day is unsettling. Their aircraft witnessed everything. Their radar linked into American systems, yet their own waters remain contested. Manila gains reassurance that the US will stand by them, but also a warning any clash could drag them into a storm they cannot control. Strategically, the meaning is stark. The US still defends freedom of navigation. China still presses claims with growing confidence. Each patrol, each standoff narrows the space for mistake. Next time, the wave may include shore-based missiles or fighters overhead. The clock is ticking faster. For the sailors, the memory is personal. Sweat-soaked helmets, scorched decks, the thunder of CIWS still ringing in their ears. They know today was a rehearsal for something larger. They stood the line, and the sea stayed open for now. This leaves a question bigger than the Shoal. Should America keep risking war to hold this line, or will China's weight eventually close it? If you think the US must endure, press 1. If you believe China is tightening control, press 9 and drop your answer in the comments while subscribing to follow the next chapter. It's 5:18 a.m. on the 12th of July 2025. In the Philippine Sea, east of Guam, the Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group cuts through calm waters as alarms erupt. Radar scopes bloom with dozens of fast-moving contacts. The watch calls general quarters. Hatches slam. Sailors race ladders. The carrier swings into the wind. On deck, crews clear lanes as F-35Cs and Super Hornets move forward. Arleigh-Burke destroyers light their launchers. SM-6 icons glow on screens. To the west, H-6 Kelvin's bombers close in, while stealth drones skim the waves. The first missiles break the horizon, low and fast, hunting for gaps. The air wing scrambles, and E-2D climbs to expand the picture. Growlers spool up jamming. The commander speaks once. Engage! Bright plumes roar from the escorts. Princeton and Antietam feed fire control across the net, while Zumwalt waits with its bowgun for any target that slips through. If this line holds, the group lives. If it breaks, the ocean takes everything. In the Philippine Sea, trade lanes stretch like invisible highways, carrying fuel, food, and electronics that power daily life back in the United States. Every morning, cargo ships push through these waters on their way to Los Angeles, Seattle, or Houston. A single day of disruption means rising insurance costs, shelves left empty, and lost trust from allies who rely on American protection. That's why the Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group is here. Its job is to guard the sea lanes and deter China from striking first. For Beijing, the logic is different. Chinese bombers and stealth drones are not only weapons, they are signals. They tell Washington that China can challenge the US Navy close to Guam, the forward hub for American power in the Pacific. If the strike works, it weakens US credibility and rattles regional partners from Tokyo to Manila. If it fails, it proves America still holds the line. Every ship in the strike group carries this weight. Princeton and Antietam guard the flanks, while destroyers track low-flying missiles with split-second precision. Zumwalt, the futuristic warship, waits for a chance to use its advanced gun against whatever slips through. Above, E-2D Hawkeyes keep the radar picture clear, while Super Hornets and F-35Cs climb to intercept incoming threats. Each sailor knows they are not just defending steel, they are defending families, trade routes, and the promise that the sea stays open. And here's where you come in. Imagine standing on deck as China presses in and the US fights back. Do you think America can hold the line, or will Beijing break through? Tell us in the comments. Press 1 if you believe the US Navy holds strong, or 9 if you think China can overwhelm. And if you want to follow how this clash unfolds, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next move. 5:19 a.m. The first wave is inbound. Radar operators count more than 20 fast-moving missiles. The commander doesn't hesitate. He orders the outer ring to fire. From the decks of Princeton and Antietam, SM-6 interceptors roar upward, carving white arcs into the morning sky. Each is guided by shared radar data across the strike group, buying seconds. Impacts come fast. Explosions ripple as interceptors meet bombers' weapons head-on. But more threats close in. Some drones skim so low that radars lose them in sea clutter, forcing quick visual cues. Arleigh-Burke destroyers launch another salvo, layering defense. Sailors grip consoles, calling out bearings. Every intercept is a gamble, each missile is costly, and China knows it can flood the sky with cheap attackers. On Gerald R. Ford's deck, tempo explodes. Catapults fling F-35Cs into the air, burners blazing as they climb to intercept. Super Hornets follow, armed with AMRAAMs, turning into the threat stream. Overhead, an E-2D Hawkeye directs the fight. its dish feeding a real-time picture to every ship and cockpit. Growlers ignite jammers, blinding hostile radars and cutting links between drones and controllers. Seconds matter. One gap could end the carrier. By 5:21, the first intercepts register. Several missiles detonate mid-air, fragments raining into the sea. Cheers ripple across control rooms, but they don't last. New tracks appear, missiles mixed with stealth drones, flying unpredictable patterns. The strike group layers defense again. Zumwalt pivots, its railgun ready to fire slugs at any leakers. The crew braces for closer combat. The horizon blooms with fire defense missiles colliding with attackers, but the wave hasn't ended. The Chinese tactic is clear. Overwhelm, drain interceptors, then break through with survivors. Inside the carrier CIC, tension runs high. One officer mutters, "They're trying to drain us." Another replies, "We hold." Across the net, the tactical action officer reassigns sectors, checks ammo tallies, and authorizes one more volley. Escorts tighten formation to close seams the drones are probing. As smoke clears from the first exchange, radar screens stay crowded. More attackers are coming, closer and faster. The opening shots bought time, but the battle is far from over. 5:23 a.m. The second wave arrives, faster and closer. Radar tracks blur as dozens of drones skim at wave-top height. Their profiles are tiny, their speed relentless. Princeton launches interceptors, but several targets slip through. Alarms scream across the destroyers as they shift fire to close range. A few anti-radiation missiles ping the escort's emitters, forcing brief radar shifts to break lock. Every toggle risks a blind spot. Arleigh Burke crews man their guns. CIWS turrets whirring. Some drones are shredded into fragments, but others dart on, forcing the carrier group to turn several degrees. It's a small maneuver, yet critical, reducing profile, tightening angles, making defenses overlap. Each ship slides a few cables to close seams. Dawn's thin light helps sensors and satellites. It helps the attackers too. Above, F-35Cs lock onto inbound targets. Missiles streak from their wings, splashing drones in pairs. Super Hornets dive low. Intercepting threats radar barely sees. Two down, more inbound. The E-2D relays constant updates as jammers and decoys flood the spectrum. AP -8 amperes calls fresh sea skimmers from the northwest, cueing the escorts. Every move buys seconds. On Zumwalt, the railgun fires. A hypersonic slug tears through a drone at 5 miles, then another, bright in the pre-dawn sky. Sailors cheer, but new red icons appear. Yet another swarm enters range. Magazines count down. SM, 6 stocks edge into yellow. Commanders weigh shots carefully, saving enough for whatever comes next. China keeps pouring assets, betting one will find a gap. Inside the Ford's Combat Information Center, tension spikes. Officers juggle interceptors, jammers, and aircraft in controlled chaos. One wrong call could leave the carrier exposed. Damage control teams pre-stage hoses and foam. Medics ready stretchers no one wants to use. The air feels electric. The next minute could decide the day. Fuel states tick down. Deck crews reload at speed. Carts rattling over the non-skid as launch cycles hammer on. And here's where you decide. If you believe the US wall of steel can keep holding, press 1 inch the comments. If you think China's relentless pressure will finally punch through, press 9. And don't forget to subscribe. This battle is only getting fiercer. 5:27 a.m. Just as the US strike group steadies, the screens flare again. A new wave surges in, smaller, faster, hugging the surface, so tightly radar struggles to separate them from whitecaps. These aren't heavy bombers or bulky drones. They're low-cost sea skimmers launched from multiple directions, meant to slip beneath layered defenses. The combat center snaps into crisis mode. Operators shout bearings. Commanders recognize the threat. The first interceptors can't lock cleanly. CIWS is lethal up close, but if too many arrive at once, one will get through. That's the gamble Beijing is making. Ford turns sharply, spray flying over its bow, while escorts shift to bring guns forward. They're under the net, a radar officer warns. Zumwalt pivots, sensors struggling to hold lock. Princeton and Antietam pump more missiles skyward, hoping sheer volume thins the pack. and E-2D rakes its radar low, calling vectors. Deck crews reload at speed, carts rattling as fresh missiles roll forward. Above, F-35Cs dive low with AIM 9Xs. It's dangerous. One wrong pull and they hit the water. Super Hornets peel off, dropping flares and chaff to break seeker locks. The fight shifts from layered defense to knife-edge chaos. The commander gives one order: railgun priority. On Zumwalt, capacitors hum. The gun fires in rapid bursts. Tungsten rounds smash skimmers into fireballs, but gaps remain, and more targets race in. Sailors grip bulkheads, bracing for the impact they fear may come. This is the twist: China shifting tactics mid-battle, forcing America to adapt on the fly. What seemed manageable minutes ago now feels like survival against a storm of steel. If even one slips past, the carrier could be lost. 5:31 a.m. The last wave closes in. Sensors scream as dozens of fast-moving icons flood the screens. This is the do-or-die moment. The Ford's commander authorizes full defensive fire. All stations engage! Princeton and Antietam fire their last interceptors, missiles streaking skyward in desperate volleys. Arleigh Burke destroyers switch to guns, barrels booming across the waves. Explosions ripple in the darkness, flashes lighting the carrier's island. Then the CIWS systems roar. Vulcan cannons spit thousands of rounds per minute, tracers slicing red arcs through the night. One drone bursts, another detonates, but more come, zigzagging through debris. Sailors cover their ears as thunder rattles bulkheads. Zumwalt unleashes its railgun. Slugs smash skimmers into wrecks, buying seconds. Still, two drones slip through. F-35Cs dive low, firing sidewinders almost at deck level. One target explodes, the other keeps coming. Seconds stretch. The drone bores in on the Ford's bow. CIWS locks late, guns blazing. Tracers hammer it to pieces just yards from impact. Shrapnel showers the deck. Sailors duck as fragments clatter across steel. The Ford shakes but holds. For a heartbeat, silence. Then alarms new missiles inbound. Growlers jam, pilots push jets to the edge of fuel. Winchester, one radio's out of weapons. The group recalculates. Seconds until impact. Magazines blink amber. Fuel states tick low. A controller reroutes the cap, squeezing one more intercept from a thin timeline. They throw everything left. Flares blind one, CIWS shreds another. The last track dives for the carrier. The commander grips the console. A final burst target gone. Spray crashes over the bow. The horizon clears. Damage reports roll in. Scorched paint, pulled panels, 2 sailors injured. Deck crews shove fresh AMRAAMs onto carts. Hawkeyes reset the air picture. The carrier strike group survives, but barely. The sea reeks of fuel and smoke. Sailors cheer. Officers count the cost missile spent. Fuel drained, aircraft empty. The fight is won, but the war isn't. And now it's your call. If you think this narrow defense proves U.S. strength, press 1 the comments. If you believe China nearly broke through and could win next round, press 9. Don't forget to subscribe. The next strike may be even deadlier. The smoke drifts slowly across the Philippine Sea. The Gerald R. Ford remains afloat, but the cost is heavy. Magazines are nearly empty, fuel levels strained, and 2 sailors injured in the chaos. For the crew, survival feels like victory, yet every officer knows this was only the first round. The Chinese strike failed to sink the carrier, but it succeeded in another way. By forcing the U.S. to spend dozens of advanced interceptors and burn fuel reserves, Beijing proved that cheap drones and mass salvos can bleed American power at scale. A few $1 million worth of expendable weapons forced the Navy to launch missiles worth hundreds of millions. That imbalance will not go unnoticed in Beijing or Washington. Still, the U.S. holds the line. Allies from Tokyo to Manila are watching closely. For them, seeing the Ford survive proves that America can still protect vital sea lanes. Cargo will continue to flow, markets will stay calm, and deterrence, at least for now, remains intact. But questions linger. How many more waves can the strike group endure? What happens if China adds land-based missiles or submarines into the mix? In the Combat Information Center, sailors reset equipment, reload what little remains, and prepare for the next alarm. The commander walks the deck, offering quiet words to exhausted crew. For them, the night has only reinforced an old truth. Survival at sea comes not from one victory, but from enduring the next attack, and the one after that. Strategically, this class shows both strength and weakness. Defense works, but at immense cost. Offense adapts fast. The balance is shifting, and the Pacific feels tighter than ever. And here's where you come in. If you think America's defense tonight proves it can always hold the seas, press 1" the comments. If you believe China will adapt and eventually break through, press 9. Either way, subscribe now because the next strike will be even bigger and you won't want to miss it. At exactly 6:47 local time, the 23rd of April, 2025, the guided missile destroyer USS William P. Lawrence slid into the northern mouth of the Taiwan Strait. Her automatic identification system flickered on a move that, in these waters, is like walking through a dark alley with your wallet hanging out. The strait is narrow, tense, and crawling with eyes that never blink. Somewhere on the Chinese mainland, less than an hour's flight away, someone was already watching. 53 miles inland, at a PLA Air Force base, a lone radar blip bloomed on a green screen. The operator's hand went straight to the phone. He didn't need to confirm it was Navy Day in China, and an American destroyer had just waltzed in without an invitation. The scramble horn shattered the morning calm. Two J-16 fighter pilots, halfway through their tea, froze for only a heartbeat before bolting. They were already halfway into their flight suits before the echo faded. On the tarmac, ground crews moved with mechanical precision safety pins yanked from missiles. Fuel hoses disconnected, ladders pulled away. Each jet would carry a pair of PL-10 heat-seeking short-range missiles and two PL-15 radar-guided long-range weapons. No anti-ship missiles today, but that wasn't the point. The point was to prove just how close they could get to the Lawrence. Close enough that, if their payload had been different, the ship would already be a smoldering wreck in the waves. Out on the open water, the Lawrence's crew manned their stations. Her Spy 1 radar spun silently, stitching together a perfect, godlike picture of every aircraft, ship, and fishing boat within 250 miles. Somewhere in that vast display, two contacts would soon appear fast, direct, and coming straight for them. By 6:52, both J-16 second were airborne, climbing through 10,000 feet. In each cockpit, the weapons systems officer clicked through an abbreviated checklist. Hydraulics green, navigation aligned, weapons hot. Twin ALWA 31 Farad afterburners pressed the crews into their seats as the fighters arrowed toward the strait. Within seconds, the Type 1475 AESA radar came alive. Its 1,760 transmit-receive modules could steer energy like a scalpel, painting a target while staying almost invisible off-axis. This was not the spray-yun-pray beam of a lighthouse, it was a whispering spotlight. American air crews call it the ghost. You often don't know it's staring until the first warning tone bleeds into your headset. Inside the destroyer's Combat Information Center, comms sounded like clipped checklists and steady breathing. The Spy 1 array had tracked the pair for more than 200 miles, but the rules of engagement were simple and unforgiving. Weapons free only in self-defense. The Aegis network fused every track into a single, seamless picture: civil airliners, fishing junks, patrol craft, and now two fast movers angling down the threat axis. The strait itself tightened the vise. At its narrowest, barely 130 kilometers across, the Lawrence was threading a legal needle between territorial claims, every mile compressing reaction time. Altitude, range, bearing the geometry was settling into a confrontation both sides could sketch from muscle memory. The Chinese would press close to prove a point. The Americans would log, shadow, and endure. Across the water, the J-16 flight lead eased the nose, building speed while his wingman slid wide to set a bracket. Invisible data pulsed between jets and coastal radars. On the Lawrence, coffee cooled in forgotten cups while watchstanders counted down to the moment when dots would become decisions. Inside the destroyer, the SLQ-32 stopped treating the strait as background static. Two X-band emitters cut through the haze with fighter-grade fingerprints. A watchstander armed the recorders. Every pulse was captured and time-stamped. Calm voices in CIC narrowed to short acknowledgments. The sea was smooth. The spectrum was not. At 7:11, the flight lead made it personal. He rolled inverted at 20,000 feet, put the nose on the plotted ship, then rolled upright and pushed. Altitude became speed. At 500 feet, the air was thick. The AL-31F's drinking hard. One lapse here and you don't divert, you crater. His WMD-7 pod steadied on the superstructure. Through haze, he could read hull numbers, distance, closure, and time to minimum separation flickered on his visor like a countdown. Aegis did quiet math. In a shooting war, SM-2 second would work the outer air, ESSMs, the knife fight, and Phalanx the last wall of tungsten. But the rules of engagement were iron, self-defense only. The system knew which VLS doors to crack and which trajectories would guarantee a kill. The doors stayed shut. The ship logged and held course. The pilot knew those envelopes. 3 miles put him inside comfortable SM-2 geometry and well within ESSM. At 1 mile, even that shrank, leaving only the Gatling storm if someone pressed. He wasn't here to fire, he was here to prove he could have while recording every twitch of the destroyer's defenses. 5 miles east, his wingman slid wide and built a bracket. If fire control locked the leader, the second jet would inherit a clean attack azimuth from the beam. Coastal controllers nudged headings for a rear quarter approach. Better video, safer under American ROE. In Sea Search, the wingman saw William P. at B. Lawrence as a 509-foot rectangle pushing 18 knots, wake bright against gray water. If their pylons held YJ-83 second instead of PL series air-to-air, launch would have come from roughly 20 to 30 miles. The missiles would drop to wave skim and pop only in the terminal blink. From that profile, the crew would have seconds, not minutes, once seekers broke the horizon. Today, that math stayed academic. That was the point. The runs began measured, repeatable, designed to stop a breath short of an incident. From a stern, then a beam, the jets held 300 to 500 feet, cameras steady, throttles breathing. On the bridge, mugs rattled. Below, watchstanders logged every sweep, every mode change, every shift in PRF. The dots were now metal and thunder, close enough to shake rails, close enough that a single wrong word on any net could turn a demonstration into a disaster. At 5 miles, the ship's close-in weapon system quietly took notice. Phalanx radar acquired the inbound fighters, tracked them cleanly, and then waited guns cold. Safety doctrine firm. On the scopes, the J-16 second flickered from search to track while scan, a focused brush of energy every 2 seconds. Out on the jets, KG-800 jamming pods warmed, ready to flood the bands, but the run stayed dry. This was about proximity, not blinding. The lead pilot steadied at 3 miles astern, wake centered in his HUD. He inched the throttles forward, afterburners lit with twin orange cones. At a mile, he could make out sailors on the flight deck. At half a mile, William P. Lawrence filled the glass. At 1,000 feet, he roared overhead altitude 300 feet, offset slightly to starboard for the camera. The jet wash slapped the superstructure. Rails rattled. Bodies leaned into the artificial gale. On the bridge, the anemometer spiked 95 knots, then back to normal. In CIC, the moment was logged with professional flatness. 7 hours, 11 minutes, and 34 seconds, J-16, altitude 300 foot, lateral separation 50 foot. Aegis had already computed 17 clean ways to kill him. SM-2, ESSM, even the last-ditch wall of tungsten. The rules of engagement chained every option. Self-defense only. The lesson was recorded on both sides. A pattern took shape by 7:23. The fighters alternated runs every 2 minutes, one from astern, one from the beam. They held between 300 and 400 feet low enough to make headlines, high enough to cite safety compliance if anyone asked. Each pass arrived on rails, stable, repeatable, designed to look effortless and feel inevitable. Then came the capabilities display. The lead slowed to 150 knots. Gear up, flaps cracked, sliding into a half-mile parallel on the destroyer's port side. His WMD-7 pod locked on the bridge windows and stayed welded there. The helmet-mounted sight cued PL-10's second wherever he looked. The point wasn't the missile, it was the message. My sensors can hold you the entire time. On the American side, watchstanders captured every frame, every tone, every mode switch. The wingman chose theater. He lined up high, then pushed for a supersonic crossing at 1,000 feet, a clean boom that rippled the sea and thumped through steel. Windows quivered. Coffee jumped in mugs. On deck, heads ducked on instinct and then lifted, work resuming as if on a metronome. And still, no one fired. The destroyer's systems tracked, predicted, and held. The J-16 second pressed, paraded, and broke away, only to return on fresh headings. It was pressure applied with a micrometer, close enough to set teeth on edge, measured enough to stop short of trigger pulls. The strait had become a stage, and both sides were playing to the cameras while pretending they weren't. By 7:38, the picture hardened. SPY-1 resolved a heavy return dead ahead, a Type 052D destroyer sliding across the Lawrence's track. Its Type 346 Ampere AESA painted the ship in narrow beams. In her VLS, YJ-18 second sat silent yet eloquent subsonic cruise. Terminal sprint. Range fell to 8 miles as the original J-16 pair yielded to 2 fresh fighters lifting from the mainland. In CIC, Aegis fused tracks, drew soft red engagement arcs, and kept every weapon cold. The helm held 18 knots. The navigator threaded a corridor legal by meters. The newcomers pressed lower and faster. The lead leveled at 200 feet and 500 knots, the destroyer filling his HUD like a runway. At minimum separation, he skimmed 300 feet overhead, offset 100 starboard for the camera. The wingman chose spectacle, executing a crossing run 150 feet high, 500 ahead of the bow. Sea to sky, the vice set. Fighters roamed above, a surface combatant loomed ahead, and if experience counted, submarines waited below the layer. Ground control braided vectors with the O-52D's approach, squeezing options without tripping a tripwire. The CO's guidance stayed the same. Transit peacefully, document everything, do not escalate. Every discipline mile tightened the spring. By 7:52, 2 attack lines were forming, one dead ahead, one from astern. The O-52D pushed to 30 knots as the fighters restacked for alternating passes at 300 to 400 feet. Sensors hummed. Phalanx tracked. ESSM solutions blinked and waited. Proximity did the talking. Access, not warheads. Restraint, not gun gas. The strait felt smaller with each pass, as if someone were bleeding oxygen from the room. And still the destroyer held course. Cameras rolling, logs filling, crew steady on checklists. The message captured on both sides was simple and undeniable. We can do this again closer, faster, whenever we choose. At 7:52, the trap closed. One J-16 drove in from dead ahead at 300 feet, while another pressed from astern at the same altitude. Far ahead, a Type 052D surged to 30 knots and held a crossing line. On the Lawrence's scopes, vectors crossed like drawn blades. No one blinked. Radio spoke in clipped syllables. The lead jet dropped to roughly 120 feet and slid a beam to port, inside 200 feet. At the same instant, his wingman ripped past the starboard beam at 400, afterburners pouring orange into gray air. The destroyer sat in a deliberate scissors of noise and proximity. Phalanx reacted first. The mount snapped from search to track, and the barrels spun to pre-fire RPM with a wasp nest whine. Across Aegis consoles, ESSM solutions flashed ready. The TAO's thumb hovered over the inhibit. One press would unchain a wall of tungsten. For a handful of stretched seconds, the picture saturated. KG-800 second were hot. The J-16 second radars ticked in focus bursts. SPY-1 painted perfect cones and held them. Range, altitude, and closure tumbled toward zero. Breaths stopped and stayed stopped. The captain's order did not change. Hold. Record. The ship obeyed its own restraint, even as the easy answer begged to be taken. Abruptly, both fighters pitched into steep climbs, afterburners flaring as they clawed for altitude and bled from view. Track lost out of envelope. A watchstander called. Relief stitched through the syllables. Phalanx spun down from angry purr to a ticking coast. Ahead, the O-52D eased her nose and slid to parallel. Shadow instead of blade. Pressure, not collision. Radio discipline held. No taunts, no warnings. Only sterile calls and clean logs. Fuel math caught up with the jets. Arcs bent north and kept going. Contrails thinning into haze. The destroyer steadied again at 18 knots, wake straight as a yardstick. In CIC, someone finally exhaled. Data, video, ELINT, and radar tracks stacked into neat folders. A petty officer restarted a checklist, voice steady but a notch lower. On the bridge, the horizon returned to its usual size. Coffee returned to cups. The lesson was unspoken and obvious. Proximity is a weapon. Restraint is too. The Chinese showcased access without lighting a fuse. The Americans answered with control without surrendering space. Both sides recorded everything. By 8 o'clock, the strait looked ordinary again. Whitecaps, freighters, traffic lanes. Ordinary was a useful lie. The Lawrence held her southerly track, antennas listening, cameras rolling, the crew back on rhythm. Steel on water, light on waves, and the quiet knowledge of how narrowly the morning had walked the edge. It's 12:07 p.m. on the 3rd of July, 2025. In the waters east of Natuna Bazaar, the roar of jet engines cuts across the sea. On the deck of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, alarms blare. Radar screens light up with multiple unknown tracks. Sailors rush to battle stations. Every movement drilled and precise, but the tension is raw. Over the horizon, China's carrier Shandong has launched its fighters J-15 slicing low, escorted by shadowing destroyers. The U.S. carrier group braces. A Japanese ship, JS Izumo, adjusts course nearby, while Australia's HMAS Canberra signals readiness. Each ally knows one wrong move here could set the Pacific on fire. Above, American F-35C streak into the sky to intercept. Down below, submarine contacts flicker in and out, Kilo-class hunters lurking unseen. The air crackles with electronic jamming. This is not a drill. This is the knife edge of confrontation. The next minutes will decide whether the sea stays open or turns red. In the South China Sea, shipping lanes cut straight through daily life back home. Oil, gas, electronics, everything rides these waters. If they stop, gas prices jump, shelves thin out, and trust in America's promise to keep trade routes open starts to crack. That's why the USS Theodore Roosevelt is here with allies, facing China's push to control the approaches east of Natuna. Beijing's move is blunt. Push the carrier Shandong forward, screen it with Type 055 destroyers carrying YJ-18 cruise missiles, and let Kilo-class submarines prowl beneath. Add electronic jamming, reconnaissance drones, and a reminder that shore-based missiles can reach far. The aim is pressure without a shot, make the U.S. blink, make smaller states self-censor, and bend the map. For the task force, the stakes are bigger than one standoff. It's credibility. If they yield here, Tokyo questions the alliance. Canberra wonders if Washington still has the steel. Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines watch every move. Insurance markets watch too. A misread today becomes a price hike tomorrow. So far, the crisis is tense but bloodless. UAVs probe and harass. F-35C SWAT, several down. A Burke-class destroyer widens its radar picket to break the box. P-8 Amperes aircraft rake the sea with sonobuoys, hunting shapes below. JS Izumo swings to starboard. HMAS Canberra tightens the screen. Every move is filmed by satellites and rumors spread online before officers can draft a message. The choice is simple and brutal. Hold formation and risk escalation, or ease off and watch influence drain away. Out here, hesitation is a message. Resolve is too. Before this line snaps, one side must read the other fast. Who should back down here, China or the US and allies? Drop your take below. Press 1 if America must hold the line, or 9 if Beijing's gamble will prevail. 12:42 p.m. The radar scope glows with new contacts fast. Low, coming straight in. Operators call them out in clipped voices, each number a threat of danger racing across the sea. The commander doesn't wait. Orders snap. Launch F-35C, vector them to intercept, and ready the destroyer's launchers. Seconds matter. The first asset unleashed is the carrier's fighters. Two F-35C peel off the deck, burners flaring, climbing hard to cut the lead tracks. Each carries missiles designed to reach fast and hit clean. Their task is to thin the wave before it grows unmanageable. Next comes the second layer. The Arleigh Burke destroyer on Roosevelt's flank locks targets and fires standard missiles. Long white streaks cut upward, curving into arcs, hunting the oncoming threats. For the crew, it's routine only in training. Out here, each missile costs millions, and each one fired means the enemy has forced America's hand. Japanese and Australian partners plug the gaps. JS Izumo vectors its helicopters to expand radar coverage, ensuring no blind spot. HMAS Canberra signals ready to launch its own interceptors if the next wave breaks through. Across radios, voices overlap in English and Japanese, clipped and urgent, every call checked twice. Coordination means survival. The first intercepts hit home. Bright flashes bloom on the horizon, enemy drones exploding midair. Cheers ripple, but only for seconds. Operators report more inbound tracks hidden behind the first group. It's a tactic to overload defenses' classic saturation. The P-8 Ampere's Poseidon patrol aircraft adds its eyes. From high altitude, it sweeps the battle space, confirming what the destroyer already fears: multiple launch points. From both the carrier Shandong and its escorting ships, China is testing range, reaction time, and willpower all at once. As interceptors reload, the sky grows crowded with contrails and smoke. Sailors grip railings and consoles, waiting for the next alarms. The first wave is beaten back, but everyone knows what's next. A heavier strike, closer, harder, faster. Below deck, fire teams stand by, hoses coiled, foam ready, whispering checklists they hope never to use. Far off, the Shandong turns into the wind again, another launch cycle building, another test of nerve. This battle has only begun. 1:15 p.m. A second wave emerges on radar, tighter, faster, and more unpredictable. Several drones slip past the outer defenses, their signatures masked by electronic noise. The destroyer fires again, intercepting some, but not all. Every operator knows, even one breaking through could be fatal. The carrier group shifts tactics. Theodore Roosevelt turns a few degrees, reducing its profile and forcing enemy tracks into narrower firing angles. On deck, gunners brace beside their mounts, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. Metal clanks, belts feed, safeties click off. This is the moment training becomes survival. Above, F-35C re-engage. They cut across the incoming wave, unleashing missiles and bursts of cannon fire. Explosions ripple, but still, new contacts replace the old. China's saturation tactic is working quantity, forcing quality to the edge. Every intercept buys seconds, not safety. Allied ships keep pace. Izumo shifts closer, offering overlapping radar coverage. Canberra launches helicopters to scout for lurking submarines, because one torpedo now could end the fight before it begins. Across the formation, crews strain to hold the line, aware they're being watched by allies, rivals, and millions online. The burden grows heavier. Ammo counts flash red. Reload drills run non-stop, sweat mixing with salt spray on the decks. The carrier's captain orders speed increased, wake widening as engines drive harder against the sea. Maneuvering is part of defense. Every knot and turn cuts angles that attackers try to exploit, but the enemy keeps coming. More drones dive low, skimming the water, while radar jammers overhead blur the sky into static. Operators shout bearings, gunners swivel, interceptors fire again. Each kill is a small relief, but no one celebrates. The crew knows, if even one makes it through, it could slam into steel and send hundreds scrambling for damage control. Both sides test nerve and endurance. China pushes to break formation. America and allies dig in to hold it. Out here, persistence is as much a weapon as missiles. Whose strategy will crack first, China's storm or the US shield? Drop your take below. Press 1 if America's defense holds, or 9 if Beijing's relentless push will smash through. 1:42 p.m. Just as the crew steadies, a new alert blares. These aren't the same drones. Smaller, faster, hugging the surface, harder to see, harder to kill. They slip beneath radar sweeps, appearing only seconds before impact. This is China's next card, a twist meant to overwhelm even seasoned crews. The commander reacts instantly. Orders cut through the noise. Activate close. In defenses. Bring secondary systems online. Prepare for rapid fire. The ship's gunners tense, fingers poised, as the threat closes distance with terrifying speed. Helicopters from Izumo and Canberra scramble lower, trying to extend detection. Still, the swarm splits, each craft darting unpredictably, weaving between waves. It's a deadly game of hide and strike, designed to drain reaction time. The call goes out for a third layer of defense. Phalanx CIWS batteries rotate, barrels whirring, radar domes tracking at knife range. Every second shaved off detection is a second bought for survival. Crews brace as the mounts begin to scream. On deck, sailors watch tiny specks racing across the water. The speed is shocking, faster than anything in the first wave. If one breaks through, it won't just dent steel. It could ignite fuel, cripple the carrier, or end the mission outright. The commander knows this is the real test. Standard missiles won't save them now. It's down to reflexes, gunfire, and split-second calls. Every sailor feels the weight. Whether this moment ends with a clear horizon or burning wreckage depends on their aim. The sea boils with spray as rounds hammer downrange. Targets explode in white flashes, but new ones appear just behind. The twist is here, and the crew faces their hardest fight yet. 2:05 p.m. The last wave surges in. Dozens of fast contacts streak toward the carrier group, some skimming the waves, others diving from altitude. The bridge goes silent except for clipped commands. This is it, the point where victory or disaster is measured in seconds. CIWS guns thunder. Tracers cut across the sea like white-hot ropes, stitching the horizon. Explosions ripple as drones are torn apart, but the swarm doesn't stop. Each kill is replaced by another diving closer. Sailors grip their stations, jaws tight, eyes unblinking. On the Roosevelt's deck, gunners switch to manual, swinging barrels by instinct. The roar is deafening, steel vibrating with every burst. Nearby, the Burke-class destroyer unleashes a final salvo, its tubes flashing in sequence. Japanese and Australian ships join in, creating a wall of firepower. Coordination is everything. One gap, and the enemy slips through. A drone breaks through the first screen, screaming low. The CIWS locks, fires, and at the last second, the target explodes in a blinding flash. Spray showers the deck, sailors ducking as fragments rain down. Another drone follows, weaving harder. The crew adjusts, fires again, shredding it yards from the hull. Below decks, teams sprint, hoses run, watertight doors sealed. EW operators shout bearings. Jammers burn through static, peeling clutter off the scopes. Chaff blooms flare silver, luring seekers wide. A Seahawk skims past the bow, dragging a decoy sled. One drone veers off, lost in smoke. On Izumo, a gun crew rides recoil, cheering as the last speck winks out. For a hot minute, no one breathes. Then the closest threat yet, a fast mover hugging the waves, seconds from impact. Gun mounts track, shells pour, tracers vanish into the body. The target erupts, flames scattering across the surface. The carrier shakes, spray washing over the bow. Alarms fade as radar shows the skies clearing. Silence falls, smoke drifts, crews exhale for the first time in hours. The carrier stands scarred but alive. The formation tightens, counting ammo, counting luck, and counting on each other for whatever comes next. In moments like this, who truly holds the edge, America's layered defense or China's relentless waves? Drop your answer below. Press 1 if the shield proves stronger, or 9 if the storm nearly broke it. 2:45 p.m. The horizon is finally quiet. Smoke drifts where drones fell, and the sea is littered with debris. The Roosevelt's deck crews work non-stop, checking for damage, rearming CIWS, and resetting launchers. Sailors' faces are streaked with sweat and salt, but relief is written in their eyes. They survived the heaviest assault yet. The cost, though, is clear. Missile stocks are reduced, gun barrels overheated, and fuel reserves stretched thin. Every interception burned resources the group can't easily replace. The lesson is harsh. Cheap drones and waves of pressure force America to spend millions just to stay afloat. For Washington, the outcome proves the defenses work, but also that the enemy adapts. China's strategy of relentless swarms nearly cracked the line. For allies, the sight of America standing firm is reassurance, but also a warning that the margin of survival is thinner than ever. Tokyo and Canberra will double down on readiness. Southeast Asian states will debate how far to lean toward the U.S. shield. Beijing, meanwhile, studies every intercept and every hesitation. They didn't sink a carrier, but they exposed limits. Each wave was a message. We can bleed you, we can wear you down. And that message will echo in every future standoff. For the sailors, it's more personal. They walked the knife's edge and held. Tonight, they'll write emails home saying they're safe without describing how close it came. Tomorrow, they'll drill again, knowing the next wave might be bigger, faster, and deadlier. Commanders log lessons, analysts replay each intercept, deck crews patch scars unseen. The South China Sea remains open, but only just. The fight for control isn't over, it's entering a new phase. If you had to choose, who came out stronger today, America holding the shield, or China proving it can nearly break it? Drop your answer below and subscribe to catch the next episode. Press 1 if you think the US showed it still owns the line, or 9 if Beijing's pressure struck deeper. At exactly 4:14 local time on the 24th of June, 2025, the Black Sea looked calm enough to swallow sound. A Russian Cerna-class landing craft, 30 troops jammed inside, drove hard toward the western shore of Kherson, confident, routine, unhurried. What the crew didn't know was that for 27 minutes, a Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 had been shadowing them from 18,000 feet, patient as a hawk riding thermals over a sleeping field. In 90 seconds, that routine was going to die. The TB2 had launched at 2 o'clock from a concealed strip near Mykolaiv, slipping into a sky that was more ink than air. This wasn't some jury-rigged shopping mall quadcopter. It was Turkey's answer to the Predator, a lean, long-endurance hunter designed to stay aloft for 27 hours, while feeding crystal-clean video to a ground crew that lived by checklists and coffee. Its Rotax 912 engine hummed at a steady 70 knots, slow enough to conserve fuel, fast enough to be anywhere it needed to be. Why rush when the night itself is cover? The route in was a quiet lesson in survival. Instead of a straight line, the TB2 traced a careful curve that kept it at least 50 kilometers from known Russian S-300 sites, stepping across radar gaps the way a burglar steps across floorboards. The operators had learned the hard way that a small radar cross-section about a large bird doesn't make you invisible. And arrogance in Russian airspace is how a $5 million asset becomes a smoking footnote. By 3:30, the drone slid into its patrol station, a 40 by 20 kilometer rectangle positioned to watch the main approaches to Kherson's beaches. The aircraft settled into its autonomous pattern, quiet, methodical, unseen. Below, the Cerna kept cutting west. Above, the hunter waited, building a picture, buying time, and letting the sea keep the secret a little longer. From its station high above the sea, the TB2's Westcam MX-15D sensor ball roamed the darkness. Built in Canada, this wasn't just a camera. It was a multi-spectral imaging suite that could read a license plate from 20 kilometers away. In infrared mode, the Black Sea below turned into a glowing canvas, every heat source painted like a white flare in coal dust. The operator sat in a ground control station that looked more like a gamer's battle rig than a military post, multiple screens, toggles, and a joystick that could decide the fate of a ship. The drone flew its programmed rectangle while he alternated between visual and thermal imaging every few minutes. Drone warfare was like that. 99% scanning empty water, 1% heart-pounding action. Tonight, that ratio was about to flip. At 3:47, A faint hotspot appeared on the thermal feed, moving west at roughly 30 knots. It left a warm wake that glowed against the cold sea. The operator zoomed in. The blur resolved into the sharp silhouette of a Project 11770 Cerna-class landing craft, 26 meters of fast, shallow draft steel built for beach assaults. These vessels could haul 92 armed troops or even a main battle tank straight onto sand. And this one wasn't alone. 2 more vessels followed. 5 kilometers behind, a telltale convoy. This wasn't a routine patrol or a supply run. 3 boats meant coordination, protection, and purpose. The operator tagged each contact and began recording. Every pixel mattered. Any of it could end up on an intelligence officer's desk by morning. The lead Cerna skimmed the sea like a speedboat, its water jet propulsion throwing a smooth, hot wake. Through thermal imaging, the operator spotted heat signatures on deck, human bodies, at least 2 dozen. These weren't sailors moving with casual rhythm. Their posture, gear, and pattern screamed infantry. By 4:10, the pattern was undeniable. The convoy's heading pointed straight for a stretch of beach 8 kilometers west of Kherson, the same sector where Ukrainian patrols had reported suspicious signs the week before. The operator reached for the secure line. Whatever this was, the Russians were minutes away from meeting company they couldn't see coming. At 4:15, after nearly half an hour of silent tracking, the order came through the headset in 3 short words: "Cleared to engage." It was a call made not from the operator's seat, but from the 383rd UAV Brigade's Operations Center, where senior officers had been watching the same live feed. It wasn't a decision taken lightly. Every MAM-L missile cost around $70,000, and the TB2 carried only 4. More than that, striking here would reveal to the Russians that Ukraine could run armed drones this far south, potentially compromising future missions. But the payoff was irresistible. Destroy the convoy before it could land, and you could shatter an operation before it began. The lead Cerna was now 15 kilometers from shore, still making 30 knots on a steady 330 degrees Celsius source. Predictable targets are dead targets. The TB2's autopilot received new coordinates, breaking from its patrol box and swinging wide left into an arc that would place it directly behind the Russian column. The plan was textbook. Take out the lead vessel first to cause maximum confusion and choke the formation. The operator's fingers danced across the console, loading targeting protocols. On his screen, the image magnified until individual crewmen were visible, most clustered near the stern to avoid wind classic mistake. Bunching up made them easier to kill. Their equipment confirmed the earlier assessment: tactical vests, helmets, and assault rifles, not supply crates or cargo. Hanging under the drone's wing was the MAM-L, its name a Turkish acronym for Smart Micro Munition. Barely 22 kilograms in total weight with a 10-kilogram warhead, it was small enough to be carried by a drone, yet lethal enough to pierce light armor or shred the thin steel plating of a landing craft. The missile used semi-active laser homing, which meant the TB2 had to keep its laser pointed on target until impact. From 8 kilometers, that translated into roughly 43 seconds of unwavering lock, plenty of time for a target to start shooting back, but also the range sweet spot for a precision kill. Now, the drone banked again, settling into position. Below, the convoy plowed forward, oblivious to the fact that their mission's fate was hanging literally over their heads. The TB2 eased into its attack run, every adjustment deliberate, every second ticking toward the point of no return. Through the Westcam's 15x optical zoom, the Cerna-class landing craft now filled the operator's main display. He could see the subtle shimmer of heat radiating from its engines, the shapes of antennas, even the hull number painted along the side. The laser designator was armed but idle, waiting for the perfect range. At 12.7 kilometers, the MAM-L could technically hit, but accuracy beyond 8 kilometers began to degrade. Patience would make the difference between a hit and a wasted missile. The operator watched the distance countdown: 11 kilometer, 10, steady. The Russian craft held its course. No hint it knew death was spiraling above. Then, movement in the convoy drew his attention. The 2 trailing vessels broke formation, one veering north, the other south. It was a maneuver straight out of a playbook. They were setting up a perimeter. This wasn't just a landing, it was the opening of something much larger. Reinforcements? Diversionary forces? The operator didn't have the luxury of finding out. Whatever the Russians were planning, it had to end now. The TB2 shifted to align with the Cerna's axis of movement. The MAM-L performed best when fired along the target's travel path, minimizing course correction and maximizing impact precision. The operator's heartbeat thudded in his ears as the crosshairs held steady on the vessel's bridge. Wind at altitude was minimal, 5 knots at most, ideal for stable targeting. The only threat was a cloud bank creeping in from the west, but it wouldn't reach the area for at least an hour. The engagement window was as good as it would ever get. 9 kilometers. 8. The range was perfect. His thumb hovered over the release authorization when a warning flashed red across the screen. Laser malfunction. Recalibrate. It felt like someone had punched him in the chest. The target was now 7 kilometers from shore, slowing slightly for its final approach. Every second lost was ground gain for the enemy. Without the laser, the missile was just dead weight. The operator's hands moved on. Instinct, laser off, laser on, forced the system through a self-test. 5 seconds, 10, laser operational. The green light returned. Now it was just a matter of locking on again before the window slammed shut forever. The crosshairs locked back on the Cerna's bridge, the laser designator flooding it with invisible energy. Target data stabilized. Yet, something about the boat's profile bothered the operator. The deck was overcrowded, far too many bodies for a 30-man infantry detail. Along the gunwales, strapped down with thick cargo netting, sat large waterproof crates. They weren't standard ammunition boxes. Whatever they were, their secrets would be revealed in precisely 43 seconds. At 4:47, the MAM-L slipped from the TB2's wing mount. Its fins snapped open with a crisp metallic crack, the missile seeker instantly scanning for the reflected laser beam. Inside, a compact onboard computer crunched numbers. Altitude 18,000 feet, range 7.8 kilometers. Estimated time to impact 43 seconds. On the operator's display, the Russian craft looked oblivious. Crewmen glowed bright in infrared, some smoking casually, others inspecting rifles, a few leaning on the rails. Then, a sudden gesture. One sailor pointed upward. Whether he'd spotted the TB2 or the descending missile didn't matter. At a closure rate of 185 kilometers per hour, no human reaction could beat physics. Panic rippled across the deck. Several men dove behind equipment. Others scrambled to bring heavy weapons to bear, hopelessly aiming at an unseen threat far above. But something far stranger unfolded. Troops began shoving those cargo crates overboard. The boxes splashed into the sea one after another, bobbing briefly before drifting astern. Why abandon cargo instead of defending themselves? The TB2's stabilized gimbal held the laser steady, unaffected by the rush of adrenaline in the control room. The range counter ticked 5 kilometers. 4, 3. In the UAV brigade's operations center, Ukrainian intelligence officers leaned toward their monitors. Even in thermal, the troops' camouflage pattern was wrong, distinct from regular Russian naval infantry. The crates bore Cyrillic stencils unlike any standard supply marking. 15 seconds to impact. The missile knifed through the night air, invisible to the naked eye but burning bright in the TB2's infrared feed. The operator exhaled slowly, heartbeat steady. Below, the Cerna plowed forward into fate, its crew unaware that the last seconds of their mission and their lives were vanishing. At 4:48, the MAM-L slammed into the Cerna-class landing craft amidships with surgical precision. The 10-kilogram warhead tore through the thin steel hull before detonating a sharp concussive blast that split the night. Fire and shrapnel ripped outward, shredding the deck and sending men tumbling into the sea. But what came next made every intelligence officer in the 383rd UAV Brigade sit forward. Exactly 1.3 seconds after the primary explosion, a chain of secondary blasts erupted, white-hot jets of molten light spraying skyward like fireworks from hell. This wasn't ammunition cooking off. The signatures were unmistakable. Demolition charges, likely thermite-based, engineered to melt through steel and concrete. The TB2's camera zoomed in. Amid the smoke and debris, waterproof cases bobbed to the surface, some still intact, others cracked open to reveal metallic cylinders inside. The Cyrillic markings were now visible in high definition. The operator didn't need a translator to know what they meant. These weren't supplies for an infantry landing. This was a sabotage kit enough to cripple a port facility or take down a key bridge. Within 90 seconds of impact, the Cerna broke in half, its bow and stern drifting apart as flames licked across the wreckage. The sea glowed in infrared as burning fuel spread in rippling patterns. Emergency Russian radio traffic lit up multiple channels, but the content told its own story. There was no mention of rescue operations, only frantic coordination to pull the remaining vessels back toward Crimea. The two trailing boats executed hard turns and accelerated at full speed, abandoning their comrades without a second thought. Operational security clearly outweighed saving lives. By the time they disappeared from the TB2's view, their mission, whatever it had been, was in ruins. In the following hours, Ukrainian signals intelligence intercepted burst transmissions, ordering an immediate recall of special operations units from the western Black Sea. Satellite imagery confirmed multiple Russian vessels returning to Sevastopol. Within a week, Russian sabotage activity in the sector simply stopped. 30 Russian operators had trained for months for a mission that ended in less than 2 minutes. Their cargo, likely the centerpiece of a high-risk, high-reward operation, now rested at the bottom of the Black Sea. In Moscow, someone would be explaining the failure in a room where the windows suddenly seemed very dangerous. It's 9:45 on the 21st of February 2025. In the South China Sea near Ayungin Shoal, 2 U.S. destroyers pick up multiple radar contacts closing fast. Alarms echo through steel corridors. Crews rush to stations, boots pounding the deck. Outside, gray water heaves as Chinese Coast Guard cutters and steel-hulled militia boats spread out. Over loudspeakers, warnings crackle in English, Tagalog, and Mandarin. The U.S. commander grips the bridge rail. This is no drill. Ahead, Philippine patrol vessels hold course toward the rusting hulk of BRP Sierra Madre. Engines surge, horns blare, and white water erupts as larger ships cut across bows. A helicopter circles high. Cameras track every move. Radio channels jam with orders and protests. One cutter angles in, throwing a hard block. The destroyers hold steady speed, whistle long, refusing to yield. Every second, the chance of collision grows. This standoff has minutes to stay cold or tip into chaos. Ayungin Shoal is a remote reef, but it carries heavy weight. To Manila, it is part of its own waters, guarded by the rusting BRP Sierra Madre run aground as a symbol of presence. To Beijing, it is territory claimed under its 9-dash line. And to Washington, it is the front line of a promise defending an ally against coercion. Every supply run here is a struggle. Small Philippine patrols bring food, fuel, and soldiers across open water. Chinese Coast Guard cutters, backed by swarms of militia boats, try to block them with mass and intimidation. On this day, the clash scales higher. 2 U.S. destroyers sail alongside, signaling that America will not step back. This mix of forces ally, superpower, and rival turns a shallow reef into a flashpoint with global stakes. The reef itself offers nothing. No port, no city, no airstrip. But its position controls sea lanes that carry trillions in trade each year. If one side seizes dominance here, insurance spikes, cargo shifts, and trust in American security guarantees starts to unravel. For the Philippines, failure means hunger and isolation for troops on the Sierra Madre. For the U.S., failure means more than losing a shoal. It means allies doubt and adversaries push harder elsewhere. This is why both sides take risks, with steel hulls scraping meters apart. No shots fired yet, but each aggressive move raises the chance of a sudden miscalculation. The commander on the destroyer knows one wrong turn, and a collision sparks a crisis that pulls nations deeper into confrontation. And here's where you come in. If you think the US and its allies must stand firm, press 1 inch the comments. If you believe China's pressure will keep pushing through, hit 9. Either way, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next twist in this tense standoff. 10:05. The bridge of USS Ralph Johnson hums with tension. Radar shows Chinese militia boats pushing forward in clusters, cutting across the Philippine supply track. On the radio, voices clash. Philippine officers issue warnings while Chinese cutters demand withdrawal. The U.S. commander replies firmly, "We are operating lawfully in Philippine waters." The contest of words shifts to a contest of moves. From starboard, BRP Malapascua angles in, escorting the supply ship toward the reef. A militia boat darts across her bow, steel hull scraping within meters. Malapascua blasts a horn and presses on. Behind her, BRP Bagakai runs parallel, forcing open a lane. The crew's no hesitation means failure. The Sierra Madre must be resupplied. Chinese cutters tighten their formation. CCG 5304, a massive Type 818, slides in front like a wall. Its deck crew film every move, propaganda cameras ready. The destroyer captain orders a steady 12 knots, closing the gap without aggression but refusing to yield. USS Dewey mirrors the maneuver on the opposite flank. Together, the warships form a corridor. At 10:20, tension spikes. A militia boat accelerates straight at the Philippine supply vessel, cutting across its bow in a spray of white water. Philippine sailors shout, clinging to rails. Over open channel, an American officer snaps, "Unsafe maneuver, you are endangering lives." The reply in Mandarin is cold, "Leave this area immediately." The destroyers answer with presence. A Seahawk lifts off from USS Dewey, circling overhead. Its camera locks onto Chinese cutters, recording harassment for global broadcast. Down below, sailors arm hoses and prepare fenders, bracing for impact if another ramming attempt comes. By 10:40, the convoy inches forward, every meter contested. Chinese ships' flashlights, blare horns, and cut tight circles around Philippine boats. Yet the American destroyers hold steady, shielding the convoy without firing a shot. Beijing must now choose, back off or escalate. Every sailor feels the weight. No missiles, no shells, but the danger is real. A collision here could ignite crisis in seconds. On the horizon, storm clouds build. The first engagement has begun, and nerves of steel are tested to the limit. 11. The convoy crawls forward, pressure mounting. Chinese cutters tighten their ring while militia boats dart in jagged arcs. Wakes cross at bad angles, throwing spray over rails. Philippine patrols fight to hold formation as gaps open, close, and open again. USS Dewey eases a few degrees to starboard, narrowing the corridor. Its radar paints the nearest cutter not to fire, but to show every move is tracked and recorded. USS Ralph Johnson mirrors the angle, covering the Philippine flank and keeping the supply ship tucked inside a steel hallway. At 11:15, a near miss jolts every watchstander. CCG 21514 sides across BRP Bagakay's bow, forcing a hard engine idle. Metal shrieks, spray hammers the deck, and for 3 seconds sailors brace for impact. Bagakay blasts its horn in raw defiance. The destroyers hold course and speed, tension tight as wire. Above the Seahawk circles, streaming video to Manila and Washington. In command centers, officers watch hulls pass within meters, every shove and block captured. Beijing's bet, intimidation without war. Washington's bet, deterrence without shots. The reef is a stage, and the audience is the world. Radio traffic stacks like waves, warnings, accusations, clipped replies. Through it all, the Philippine supply vessel inches forward, refusing to yield. Each cable length gained feels like a small victory. Each pass grows sharper, riskier. Deck crews rotate, medics wait with stretchers and blankets. By 11:30, the pattern shifts. Several militia boats split from the ring and sprint at the supply ship. The destroyer captain reacts. Helm, 2 degrees tighten defense. Mounts track, hoses run, fenders hang ready. The crew knows. If this line breaks, the enemy strikes home. No one assumes the next pass will be clean. Dewey slides between a militia pack and the Philippine boat. Whitewater boils along the hull. On loudspeakers, a calm voice. Unsafe maneuver. Alter course. Silence. Then another surge. Johnson comes abeam, shrinking the gap to a narrow lane. Now it's your turn. If you think the US line can hold, drop a 1-inch in the comments. If you believe China's pressure will break through, press 9. And don't forget to subscribe so you're here for the next move in this tense showdown. 11:45. Just as the convoy seems ready to grind through, the pattern shifts. From the north edge of the shoal, a cluster of Chinese militia boats appears smaller, faster, stripped for speed. They skim the chop with brutal turns. These aren't cutters that block with mass. They jab, confuse, and try to force collisions. The Philippine supply ship, heavy and slow, is the prize. Bagakai and Malapascua pivot to screen, but the swarm moves like bees. One boat slices so close its wake, slams the bow. Cameras whirl. Radios flare with warnings in 3 languages. The US destroyers read the change instantly. Deploy small craft now. From Ralph Johnson's stern, rigid hull boats drop and roar ahead. Crews in helmets and vests. They spread like outriders, forming a mobile wall that meets speed with agility. For the first time, US forces shift from static presence to active maneuver. Overhead, the Seahawk banks low, rotor wash kicking spray. Sensors track the swarm boat by boat. A near miss flashes across the feed too close for comfort, and the crew calls it in. The escalation is by risk, not firepower, but the danger feels the same. The convoy inches towards Sierra Madre. With each cable length, the swarm grows bolder, closer passes, sharper cuts. Philippine sailors shoulder rifles as a warning, muzzles down. The destroyers add speed, white trails unfurling, making it harder for the militia to pin the supply ship. This is the turn no one wanted. Small, fast, knife-edge tactics where one mistake could send men into the sea. On the bridge, the US commander's voice stays even. Hold formation. Deny them the spark. The fight has shifted from heavy walls to reflex and nerve, and the next seconds will decide if nerve holds. 12:10. The clash peaks. The Philippine supply ship is within sight of Sierra Madre, but the swarm throws everything into the final block. Dozens of militia boats surge from both flanks, engines howling, wakes colliding in chaotic spray. Larger Chinese cutters close from behind, trying to trap the convoy in a tightening vise. USS Ralph Johnson and USS Dewey surge forward, steel walls pressing into the chaos. Their hulls throw massive wakes that buffet the smaller boats, forcing sudden turns. On the bridge, every order is sharp, clipped, no wasted breath. Gunners stand ready, hoses charged, cameras rolling. At 12:15, the closest pass yet. A militia boat darts straight for Bagakai. The Philippine crew brace, shouting warnings, but Johnson cuts across, forcing the smaller vessel to sheer off at the last instant. White spray explodes over both decks. Cheers erupt below, but the tension only grows. One slip could still be deadly. Above, the Seahawk dives lower, engines hammering the air. Its cameras catch every second of the dangerous dance, broadcasting proof of reckless maneuvers. Command centers in Manila and Washington watch live. Breaths held. Beijing's cutters push closer, horns blasting, as if daring the US to strike first. 12:20. The final push. Philippine crews hold steady, steering the supply ship toward the reef. Malapascua and Bagakai weave to guard its flanks. The swarm closes again, bows flashing in the sunlight. US destroyers blast long horns, echoing like thunder across the shoal. The convoy is within minutes of safety or disaster. For the sailors, adrenaline wipes out fatigue. Hands grip rails, eyes lock on threats, and every move is muscle memory drilled in countless drills. This is the knife's edge. Will sheer determination break through, or will massed pressure force retreat? Now it's your call. If you think the convoy makes it through under US protection, drop a 1-inch in the comments. If you believe China's swarm will finally crack the line, press 9. And subscribe so you don't miss the outcome of this showdown. 12:25. The horizon shakes with horns, engines, and spray. The Sierra Madre looms larger with every passing second, and the climax hangs on a single question: who yields first? 12:40. The convoy finally reaches the rusting hulk of BRP Sierra Madre. Philippine sailors cheer, relief cutting through hours of tension. Supplies are offloaded under the shadow of Chinese ships that still circle, horns blaring, cameras rolling. No shots fired, but the sea feels like it's one breath away from war. For Manila, the mission is a success. The garrison aboard Sierra Madre holds, resupplied and still flying the flag. For Washington, the operation proves commitment. U.S. warships stood firm, shielding an ally against overwhelming pressure. For Beijing, it's unfinished business. The cutters retreat only far enough to mark presence, reminding everyone the contest is not over. The cost, though not in blood, is real. Crews are drained, nerves raw. Each risky maneuver showed how close a spark could ignite. A cheap militia boat nearly forced a collision with a billion-dollar destroyer. Every hour of this duel reminds both sides that raw persistence can be as dangerous as weapons. In the halls of power, the footage spreads fast. Allies watch and see U.S. resolve tested but unbroken. Markets feel the ripple insurance rates adjust. Shipping lanes recalculate. And adversaries take notes. Flooding the sea with small, cheap craft forced 2 destroyers and a full task group to stay on edge for hours. Strategically, the message is mixed. America proved it will defend Philippine waters, but China showed it can contest every mile without firing a shot. The reef remains supplied, but the pattern is clear. Each run will be harder, each blockade denser, each gamble riskier. Tonight, the South China Sea is quiet, but only on the surface. Every ship, every commander knows the next confrontation could come any day, and the pressure will only build. And here's where you weigh in. If you think this stand proves U.S. resolve will hold the line, press 1 inch the comments. If you believe China's relentless pressure will grind through in the end, press 9. Either way, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in this high-stakes struggle. The reef is supplied, the line is held for now. But the question hangs heavy. What happens when the next run doubles the swarm or brings missiles from the shore? That's the story waiting on the horizon. Late April light shimmered across the Taiwan Strait, calm on the surface, tight with tension underneath. On the 24th of April 2025, the USS William P. Lawrence, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer of the 7th Fleet, cut a deliberate track through those waters. This was a freedom of navigation operation, not pageantry, but a statement. These are international seas, and international seas remain open. High above, a U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon swept broad arcs over sky and sea, its sensors harvesting every echo, wake, and heat plume. Allied receivers listened in, feeds stitched together a live mosaic for commanders ashore and afloat, a carefully choreographed patrol meant to be seen. Visibility here was part of the message. The Taiwan Strait, a 110-mile wide corridor between Taiwan and mainland China, is among the world's most politically charged passages. Beijing claims it as internal waters. Washington and much of the international community does not. The William P. Lawrence sailed uninvited, unapologetic, and compliant with international law. Every mile carried layered meaning, routine transit on paper, high-stakes signaling in practice. Bridge teams kept their checklists crisp. Lookouts scanned steel-blue horizons. Combat systems hummed in quiet readiness. The destroyer knew it was on more than a charted course, it was on a line both sides watch. And in these waters, what you show can shape what happens next. Visibility, after all, cuts both ways. Chinese tracking screens were already lit before the destroyer neared midpoint. Long-range radar nets on the mainland sketched a bright line across the strait, reporting speed, course, and time to intercept. A Plan Y-8 patrol aircraft lifted from a coastal base. Farther out, a gray hull warship 132 slid into a parallel shadow 3 to 4 nautical miles abeam, matching knots and keeping station. The radio challenge arrived in a flat, rehearsed cadence. This is Chinese warship 132. You are approaching Chinese territorial waters. Turn around immediately. On the William P. Lawrence, no one flinched. The bridge logged the hail. CIC recorded it, standard script, familiar rhythm, nothing to escalate. What changed was the air picture. Controllers vectored a PLAF J-16 from the east, low and fast, masking in sea clutter. The destroyer's sensors painted the contact bearing 086. descending, accelerating. The choreography was unmistakable. Ship to fix the scene, patrol plane to watch it, fighter to press it. MCON stayed low, cameras rolled, and every syllable track and timestamp streamed live to Indo-Pacific Command. The approach was no ad-lib. It was a measured test of nerve, and the next move would arrive on a roar. A faint speck emerged from the eastern haze, growing fast against the horizon. Within moments, the shape resolved into a PLAF J-16 twin afterburners glowing, Delta Canard wings slicing the salt air. Its reputation preceded it. China's most advanced multi-role fighter, capable of mounting PL-10 short-range infrared missiles, PL-15 long-range radar-guided missiles, and precision anti-ship weapons. Today, its pylons looked clean, but the way it flew was its own kind of armament. In CIC, operators watched its data stream appear across consoles, bearing 086, altitude 250 feet, closing at Mach 0.9. The SPY-1 radar locked on instantly, feeding precise vectors into the ship's fire control network. Though it could track hundreds of contacts, all eyes fixed on this one. On deck, sailors leaned forward against the rush of wind. The fighter skimmed so low the sea spray bloomed behind its fuselage, glinting in the sunlight. Then, without warning, it dropped even lower and tore past the destroyer's bow within an estimated 150 feet. The shockwave slammed into the William P. Lawrence, rattling steel railings, shaking loose gear, and sending a brief shudder through the hull. This was no navigational oversight. The pass was calibrated to be just inside the boundary of plausible deniability, yet deep within the psychological strike zone. The jet had entered the destroyer's weapons engagement zone, a lethal envelope where, if hostile, it could launch ordnance in seconds. Bridge officers stayed composed, following the rules of engagement. No escalation unless directly threatened. Still, defensive systems shifted quietly into readiness. The Mk-45 5-inch gun angled toward the threat vector. The Phalanx CIWS rotated to standby, its motors whining under the wind's roar. High-speed cameras and IR sensors captured every frame. Acoustic and electronic logs marked every decibel and pulse. The J-16 climbed into a wide bank, vapor streaming from its wingtips before leveling out in open air. The tension eased fractionally, but everyone aboard knew the encounter wasn't finished. Inside CIC, the first pass was dissected frame by frame. Trajectory, closure rate, and altitude all met Indo-Pacific Command's unsafe criteria. More troubling, the fighter had entered the destroyer's weapons engagement zone without hesitation, demonstrating how rapidly a launch could occur if intent flipped from theater to kill. The lesson was blunt. Reaction time would be measured in heartbeats, not minutes. Fire control held a clean lock while sensors fused radar, EO, IR, and ESM tracks into a single picture. The bridge kept ROE steady, no illumination, no chaff, no flares, while watch officers weighed possibilities. Hotshot pilot freelancing or a scripted probe designed to map the ship's thresholds. Either way, readiness stayed high. Teams cycled quickly, checklists ran tight, and cameras never stopped. Minutes later, the air picture sharpened. The J-16 rolled out of its arc and dropped again, lower than before, masking in sea clutter until the last moment. Sailors on deck could see the pilot's helmet gleam, and the canopy flash as the nose pointed almost directly at the bow. The jet thundered in, passed just over the forecastle so close, the mast seemed to scrape its shadow and clawed skyward in a hard-climbing left bank. Heat shimmered across the superstructure, a violent echo of exhaust and pressure. Such proximity was not theater without risk. A slip in altitude or angle could have clipped antennas or rigging, forcing an immediate defensive response and cascading the encounter into headlines. Then crisis talks. In waters this politicized, physics and politics are separated by inches. Defenses remain poised, yet deliberately restrained. The Mk-45 stayed trained to sector. Phalanx remained on the edge of spin-up. Decoys were checked but cold. Logs noted each second. Bearing, range, altitude, radio hail, and pilot visible confirmation. The J-16 leveled, climbed to medium altitude, and began a wide orbit near enough to remind the crew it was not done. The message was unmistakable. The test was still running, and every move from here would count. For the next 90 minutes, the encounter settled into a taut rhythm. The J-16 circled at medium altitude, never straying far enough to disengage, never closing quite enough to trigger a response. Its engine noise drifted in and out, a constant reminder above the hum of turbines and the rush of water along the hull. Below decks, CIC maintained continuous tracking, bearing shifts, altitude changes, and any electronic emissions were logged in real time. The bridge rotated watch teams to keep eyes fresh. Lookouts scanned every quadrant, noting the faint outline of the Chinese warship shadowing at 3 to 4 nautical miles, maintaining a perfectly parallel course. The planned frigate made no aggressive moves, its presence steady, almost patient, like a chess piece left in place to remind the opponent of its reach. The atmosphere aboard the William P. Lawrence was focused, but calm. No one allowed the tension to slip into panic. Discipline was part of the deterrent, yet everyone knew this was not a drill. In the Taiwan Strait, visibility is both a shield and a lure. Each side wanted to be seen, to signal resolve without crossing the invisible threshold into combat. In these prolonged standoffs, time itself becomes a weapon. The J-16 steady orbit was as much a psychological tactic as a tactical one, forcing the destroyer's crew to maintain peak alertness, knowing that any lapse could be exploited. The William P. Lawrence matched that patience, holding course, speed, and composure, silently broadcasting its own message. We are here, and we are not leaving. Eventually, the J-16 broke its pattern. After a final wide orbit, it banked east and climbed, its afterburner glow fading into the haze. The Chinese warship maintained its shadow for several more miles before easing south, matching the destroyer's gradual separation. With the air threat gone, the William P. Lawrence completed its transit through the strait deliberately and without deviation, steady, visible, and unapologetic. But the incident's life was far from over. Within hours, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command released an official statement. A PRC J-16 fighter jet conducted an unsafe intercept of a U.S. Navy destroyer operating in international waters. This type of behavior is dangerous and risks miscalculation. The language was measured but firm, signaling Washington's unwillingness to normalize such maneuvers. In Beijing, state media countered quickly, framing the intercept as a defensive action against foreign intrusion. Commentators accused the U.S. of provocation, stressing China's claim over the Taiwan Strait as internal waters. The footage told its own story. High-definition video from the destroyer's cameras showed the J-16's dangerously close passes in unforgiving clarity engines, screaming, wings banking low enough to cast shadows across the deck. For the crew, it was just another day in a contested maritime corridor. For leaders in Washington, Beijing, and Taipei, it was another entry in a growing ledger of tense encounters. Inside Washington's briefing rooms and their counterparts in Beijing and Taipei, the 24th of April encounter was treated less as a headline than as usable data. Every radar, sweep, camera frame, and radio hail from the William P. Lawrence was archived, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with prior incidents to map trends in PLA behavior. Analysts look for patterns in the J-16's entry profile, its willingness to penetrate the weapons engagement zone, and the choreography between fighter, patrol plane, and shadowing warship. Past precedent sharpened the picture. In 2023, a Chinese fighter cut across the nose of a U.S. reconnaissance aircraft, forcing it through turbulent jet wash. In 2024, another J-16 released chaff and flares dangerously close to a U.S. surveillance plane. Buzzing a guided missile destroyer at low altitude and high speed felt like the next rung on the ladder, and escalation calibrated for psychological effect without crossing the hard line of kinetic exchange. For Beijing, the signal is layered. Domestically, it projects resolve. Regionally, it contests U.S. access. Internationally, it tests how elastic international waters can be made in practice. For Washington, deterrence must be equally layered, sailing where law allows while denying the PLA a pretext to paint the U.S. as the provocateur. That balance pushes stress downward onto crews whose reactions are measured in seconds. The encounter also exposes human factors. At 250 feet and 0.9 Mach, the cockpit is a cockpit of consequences. A gust, a misread altitude tape, a half-second delay each could force defensive fire or a collision neither side intended. Doctrine can script options. It cannot script adrenaline. Planners will now feed the 24th of April into simulations. ROE refinements, camera placement, IMCON posture, decoy timing, and deconfliction calls. Diplomats will weigh whether to press for tighter air-sea encounter protocols. Yet the core reality remains unchanged. In the gray zone, the most decisive weapons are judgment, restraint, and narrative control, and the margin for error keeps shrinking. The 24th of April intercept will fade from the news cycle, but not from the operational memory of those who studied the Taiwan Strait. For the crew of the William P. Lawrence, it was one more log entry in a long roster of tense patrols. For commanders and policymakers, it was a live demonstration of how modern power competition often unfolds, not with salvos, but with close passes, locked radars, and the calculated edge of intimidation. Gray zone operations thrive in ambiguity, where each side can frame its actions as defensive while probing the other's tolerance. The J-16's low-level runs illustrated how fragile that balance is. A misjudged turn or a mechanical fault at 500 knots could have transformed a test of nerve into a regional crisis within minutes. These encounters underscore a simple truth. The strait is not just a strategic waterway, it is a pressure point. Every transit, every intercept, and every public statement tightens or loosens the tension wound around it. Neither side shows signs of backing away. Both continue to assert presence, pushing the limits without crossing them outright. In such an environment, restraint is not weakness, it is survival. The April incident is now a case study, a reminder to all players that the line between assertion and aggression is razor thin. In the Taiwan Strait, where politics, pride, and proximity collide, there is no room for error. One reckless move is all it takes to change the map. It's 4:20 a.m. on the 18th of June 2025. In the South China Sea, 140 nautical miles southwest of Mischief Reef, the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Group suddenly picks up dozens of fast-rising radar tracks. Alarms punch through the ship. Red lights flood the passageways. Sailors grab helmets, slam hatches, and sprint to battle stations. On the flight deck, crews crouch behind tie-downs as the night sky flashes. Far off, thin orange needles fall toward the sea. Chinese DF-21D ballistic missiles and CJ-10 cruise missiles already inbound. The air smells of jet fuel and salt. Radios crackle. Weapons free. Aegis screens bloom with threat icons. Missiles are ranked by speed and angle, so the closest killers die first. On the bridge, the captain says one word: engage. Rails shudder as interceptors leap from the escorts. If the layers hold long, then medium, then close, the carrier lives. If one warhead punches through, steel tears, fire spreads, and the Navy's most advanced ship could vanish before sunrise. In the South China Sea, shipping lanes cut through one of the busiest highways on Earth. Every day, tankers and freighters move oil, grain, and semiconductors that keep stores stocked and factories running back home. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Group patrols here to guard those lifelines and steady partners who live within missile range of disputed reefs. The job looks simple, but it's brutal. Keep sea lanes open while a rival probes every scene. Tonight, that rival is China's PLA, firing DF-21D anti-ship missiles and CJ-10 cruise missiles from H-6 Kelvin's bombers. This patch of ocean, 140 nautical miles southwest of Mischief Reef, is where one wrong call could shake global prices in days. For the crew, the stakes are human first. If defenses fail, steel shatters and fire spreads in seconds. If a supercarrier goes down, it's not just a ship, it's a signal to every capital from Tokyo to Manila about who sets the rules. Insurance premiums rise, captains reroute vessels, freight costs climb, and the price of a phone, a car part, or a bag of rice ticks up for families far from this sea. Allies watch to see if Washington can still protect the commons. Rivals watch for hesitation. This night is also a test of economics. America built layered shields, Aegis destroyers, fighters on the roof, subs in the deep, each meant to swat fast threats. But defenders spend billions to beat cheaper missiles, and that math favors the attacker. The question is endurance. Can the carrier group hold the shield long enough to break the assault, or does sheer volume land a kill? Drop a quick 1 or 9 in the comments. US carriers hold the line, or Beijing's missiles punch through, and if you want part 3, that single digit keeps you with us. 4:32 a.m. The first alerts fade into the rhythm of action. The Ford's escorts USS John Finn and USS Halsey light off their vertical launch cells. Dozens of SM-3 interceptors roar upward, streaking into the black sky to meet the incoming wave. Each shot is calculated to kill the most dangerous track, buying precious seconds for the carrier behind them. The radar picture looks like a storm, icons multiplying, splitting, then vanishing in bursts of static as hits register. The first few intercepts work. Bright flashes mark ballistic missiles detonating in the upper atmosphere. Yet the screen fills again, new salvos arcing over the horizon, cruise missiles hugging low over the waves. CJ-10 skim barely above the water, forcing defenders to track them against sea clutter. The destroyers switch to SM-6, optimized for low-flying threats. Flares bloom, then fade, as warheads vanish. But more survive. On the Ford's flight deck, F-35C pilots race to their cockpits. Cats launch in quick rhythm, afterburners glowing. Fighters climb to meet bombers still circling hundreds of miles out. Their job, thin the herd before more missiles leave Chinese wings. Within minutes, the first intercepts hit home stealth jets, slash into H-6 Kelvin's formations, firing AMRAAMs that drop bombers before they can release a second load. Meanwhile, deep underwater, the fast attack subs USS Illinois and USS Missouri slide into firing position. Their tubes launch Tomahawk counterstrikes toward radar stations on Hainan and missile sites along the coast. Each launch is a message. Attacks won't go unanswered. Explosions ripple across the Chinese mainland as command centers and storage bunkers ignite. Back near the carrier, chaos narrows. A few DF-21D survive long enough to dive steeply toward the fleet. SM-6 rise to meet them. One explodes high, but another dives through the net. The warhead detonates close aboard. A thunderclap shaking the Ford. Shrapnel rakes the hull, injuring sailors topside, but the armor holds. No ship is lost. The defense bends but does not break. By 5:10 a.m., more than 50 missiles have been fired and 50 have been stopped. The surface of the sea glows with wreckage, debris floating in burning slicks. Smoke trails crisscross the dawn sky. Sailors breathe, but only for a heartbeat. Everyone knows this was just the first round. 5:40 a.m. The second wave comes in lower, faster, and meaner. Several Chinese drones and cruise missiles slip past the first curtain of defenses. The destroyers fire again, launchers glowing as SM-2 leaps skyward. But the radar picture stays crowded. The crew feels the tempo quicken. The enemy isn't just testing, they're pressing. Ford adjusts course by a few degrees, shrinking its silhouette against the swarm. The move tightens angles for defense, less broadside, more narrow target. Guns across the escorts come alive. Phalanx systems spitting tracers into the sky. Some missiles break apart in orange blossoms. Others keep driving straight. High overhead, a Hawkeye spins, pushing new bearings to every console. Decoys bloom chaff, flares, and Nulka rockets dragging seekers wide while C-RAM crews guard the last 100 yards. On the bridge, tension is measured in heartbeats. Sailors call out impact times, counting down in seconds. The captain's voice cuts through. Stay on it. The sea fills with explosions, water plumes shooting high as near misses slam in. The ship rides shockwaves, steel groaning with each hit nearby. Damage control teams stand ready with hoses and patch kits. Inside CIC, operators fight the clock. Jammers pour noise into seeker bands. SPY-1 arrays shift modes to hold low flyers against clutter. Track managers hand off targets in sequence, avoiding gaps. Link 1-6 chatters, welding escorts, fighters, and the Hawkeye into one picture. Every clean handoff saves a missile for the next threat. Above, FA-18E race to cut off leakers. Pilots dive, dropping bombs on drones, skimming the waves. Each success buys the carrier another breath. Each miss brings the enemy closer. The crew knows. If even one warhead hits, the mission unravels. Magazines aren't bottomless. Every intercept burns money and minutes. Yet the defense holds. Layer after layer, the shield bends but does not break. Still, the sailors see it. China will spend missile after missile, drone after drone to land one strike. And that raises the question for everyone watching. Which side runs out first, America's defenses or Beijing's arsenal? If you think the US keeps holding, hit 1 the comments. If you believe sheer volume will break through, hit 9 and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss part 5 when the twist arrives. 6:15 a.m. Just as the Ford sailors think the storm is easing, the picture changes. Radar picks up dozens of new contacts, smaller, faster, and hugging the surface. These aren't the big ballistic arcs or lumbering cruise missiles. They're sea-skimming drones packed with explosives, launched in swarms from disguised fishing vessels and low-flying bombers. Harder to see, harder to kill. The crew realizes the shift instantly. Ballistic interceptors won't help here. These threats are coming in under the radar horizon, popping up with only seconds to spare. The captain orders close-range defenses to full alert. Phalanx CIWS turrets spin. C-RAM crews grip triggers, and every lookout is told. Eyes on the water. The first swarm arrives fast. Tiny silhouettes skim the waves, weaving unpredictably. Gunners open up, tracers slashing the dawn. Some drones burst apart, spraying metal shards into the sea. Others press forward, forcing last-ditch intercepts. The ship jerks hard to port, maneuvering to spoil incoming tracks. Every second counts. Above, F-35C drop low, using cannons and smart bombs to thin the pack. One pilot radios. Too many, too low. The fight shifts from long-range intercepts to a knife fight on the water's edge. Damage control teams brace, knowing even a single drone detonation on the hull could cripple systems. The twist is clear. China isn't just throwing missiles. They're layering weapons, long-range killers, then swarms of cheap expendables designed to saturate defenses. It's a brutal math problem. For every billion-dollar carrier, the other side spends pennies on drones. The US must adapt or risk bleeding resources dry. 6:45 a.m. The last wave closes in. Dozens of sea-skimming drones, the survivors of earlier barrages, dart straight at the Ford's formation. There's no time left for long-range missiles. This is point-blank combat. CIWS mounts thunder, spitting streams of depleted uranium rounds. Tracers carve across the sky, stitching the dawn with lines of fire. One drone erupts in a fireball, another slams into the sea, but more weave through. The ship shudders under violent maneuvers, spray covering the bow as steel grinds against the waves. Inside CIC, every console screams with warnings. Operators juggle dozens of inbound tracks, shifting targets in split seconds. C-RAM batteries launch, trails curling low across the water before detonating against fast-moving shapes. The noise is deafening, the pace relentless. On deck, sailors duck behind cover as gunners keep their barrels hot. One drone explodes so close that shrapnel rains across the flight deck, tearing into parked equipment. Fire crews race forward, foam spraying to smother burning fragments. Yet the deck remains operational. Jets keep launching, climbing into the smoke-stained morning. Bridge teams switch some mounts to local control as sensors glaze with salt. Medics haul 2 injured sailors below. Both are conscious. EOD sweeps hot fragments off the deck to keep catapults clear. The battle turns chaotic. One drone makes it through, diving hard. A burst of tracers rips it apart barely 50 yards from the hull. The blast knocks sailors off their feet, the shockwave rattling bulkheads, but the carrier survives. Another drone slips into range, destroyed in a flash by a Phalanx mount, firing its last belt of ammunition. Minutes stretch into eternity. Then, silence. The sky clears, smoke drifts, the horizon is empty. The Ford still floats, scarred but unbroken. Its escorts circle tight, their magazines nearly dry. crews exhausted, but the line has held. The climax has shown both sides the truth. Technology, training, and raw willpower can hold back even overwhelming swarms, but only just. And that leaves the question for you. In a fight this close, who really wins? Drop a 1 if you think America's layered defense proves unbeatable, or a 9 if you believe sheer numbers will one day overwhelm it, and hit subscribe so you're here when the aftermath unfolds in Part 7. 7:30 a.m. The smoke thins over the South China Sea. Wreckage drifts across the waves, shattered drones, burned out missile casings, and oil slicks reflecting the first light of day. The USS Gerald R. Ford still floats at the center of its formation, scarred but alive. Its escorts circle close, some with empty launch cells, others with guns still hot to the touch. Sailors stagger from their stations, exhausted, yet knowing they've just fought the hardest battle of their lives. Result: the U.S. shield held. China's much-feared carrier killers failed to land a decisive blow. For Washington, it is proof that layered defenses work under fire. For Beijing, it is a painful reminder that strategy on paper can crumble against training, coordination, and relentless will. Billions of dollars in missiles and aircraft are gone in hours, and with them much of the rocket force's regional punch. But the cost is real. U.S. magazines are nearly drained, crews are stretched thin, and every intercept fired tonight will take months and millions to replace. The battle shows a brutal truth. Defense works, but it's expensive. Offense can be cheap, relentless, and disposable. That equation will shape every clash to come. Allies in Tokyo, Manila, and Canberra watch closely. Confidence in American resolve surges, but so does awareness of the price. NATO even issues a rare statement of support in the Pacific, a sign that this fight echoes far beyond these waters. At the same time, Beijing faces the blow of losing prestige. The carrier killer myth cracked in public view. Tonight, the carrier group held fast. The sea lanes stay open, but the rivalry is sharpened. And that leaves one last question. When the next wave comes double the drones, backed by shore-based missiles, who bends first? Drop a 1 if you believe America can still hold the line, or a 9 if you think Beijing will learn, adapt, and overwhelm. Either way, subscribe now so you don't miss the next episode when the conflict escalates. At 5:59 a.m. on May 14, 2025, the still waters of the Taiwan Strait rippled with the wake of a single warship. The USS John Paul Jones, an American guided missile destroyer, had just powered up her automatic identification system, a deliberate signal, a flare in the dark that announced to everyone who was watching, "We are here." For any other stretch of ocean, it would have been routine. But here, in one of the most contested waterways on Earth, it was something closer to defiance. Like walking into the toughest bar in town wearing the rival gang's colors, the message was clear. The U.S. Navy wasn't hiding. It was daring. 50 miles away, inside a Chinese coastal airbase, the morning silence cracked. A radar operator leaned forward as his scope lit up. Within seconds, the phone was in his hand and alarms began to wail across the tarmac. 2 J-16 fighter pilots, still midway through their breakfast, abandoned their trays and sprinted for the hangars. Today was no ordinary day. In Beijing, it was Naval Glory Day, a celebration of sea power and national pride. For Chinese commanders, the sudden appearance of an American destroyer in the strait wasn't just an intrusion, it was an insult. By the time the J-16 pilots reached their jets, ground crews were already locking in weapons, PL-10 heat seekers and PL-15 radar-guided missiles. The fighters weren't taking off just to patrol. They were launching to make a point. On the bridge of the John Paul Jones, the captain already knew what was coming. His crew watched the sun rise over a deceptively calm sea, their destroyer slicing through the water at a steady 18 knots. Yet behind the calm, the tension was electric. The rules of engagement were strict defensive fire only, unless attacked first. But the men and women aboard understood. The next few hours could decide more than their fate. They could decide the course of nations. At 6:05 a.m., the stillness shattered. Twin J-16 fighters roared skyward, their afterburners carving fire across the dawn. In less than 2 minutes, they had climbed through 12,000 feet, radars warming, missiles armed, hydraulic systems green. These weren't patrol birds, they were hunters. In the Combat Information Center of the John Paul Jones, the Aegis system painted the tactical picture with cold precision. Merchant ships, fishing boats, a passenger jet en route to Taipei, and 2 fast-moving blips closing straight for them. The CIC crew didn't need words. Everyone knew what those tracks meant. The J-16 second weren't broadcasting their positions. Instead, their AESA radars, nicknamed the Ghost, quietly locked onto the destroyer. 1 second, the ship was just another silhouette on the horizon. The next, she was glowing bright inside the pilot's helmet displays. On board the American destroyer, electronic warfare sensors lit up. New emissions, X-band, pulse signatures, military, one operator called out. Recorders whirred to life, capturing every spike, every wavelength. The sailors weren't just watching, they were cataloging, documenting, building a library of everything the Chinese jets revealed. By 6:12 a.m., the lead pilot inverted his fighter at 18,000 feet, then rolled nose down in a high-speed dive. His target, empty ocean, exactly where his radar told him the destroyer was cutting through the waves. At 500 feet, he leveled off, screaming in at more than 450 knots. Every move choreographed, every detail a demonstration. We can hit you before you react. Inside the CIC, sailors exchanged quick glances, their screens showing the range collapsing fast. Every weapon system was armed in software, but still cold. The rules were clear, no shots unless fired upon. But the reality was brutal. At this speed and altitude, one mistake could end in fire, steel, and war. On deck, the roar of the jet was deafening. Crew members gripped railings as the fighter tore past, the shockwaves slamming into sensors and rattling the mast. It wasn't an attack, not officially. It was a message, painted across the sky in raw intimidation. We own this airspace. What will you do about it? The first pass was only the opening move. At 6:20 a.m., the 2 J-16 seconds slid outward and then inward again, settling into a textbook bracket. One fighter shadowed the destroyer's port quarter, the other mirrored starboard, their angles converging like pincers. From the American scope, it looked less like a flight pattern and more like a vice tightening by the second. Inside the CIC, the Aegis plots updated with metronomic calm. Headings, airspeeds, closure rates, predicted turn radii. Calm on the screen, heat in the room. Everyone understood the subtext. If the US ship committed a hard lock on one jet, the other would gain a clean lane to threaten, photograph, or launch. Electronic warfare added a second front. The wingman toggled his radar into sea search, strobes sweeping the hull every 2 seconds. The lead fighter lit a KG-800 pod and poured noise into the spectrum, a smear of interference designed to blind fire control at the worst moment. On the spectrum analyzer, red spikes climbed like a heartbeat heading for crisis. Operators filtered, tagged, and recorded. The order held. Catalog. Everything escalate. Nothing. The lead pilot dropped again, combing the wave tops at 300 feet, then 250, trimming with featherlight inputs. At that altitude, the ocean is not scenery, it is a wall rushing past. A fractional pitch error becomes catastrophe. Yet he held a surgeon's line, crossing the bow offset for a perfect camera angle. HUD bristling with range gates and closure cues. On the bridge, the captain watched the sea and his people. He could arm missiles with a word. He could freeze the sky with a radiating lock that said, "Turn away." But every signal carried meaning, and meaning could be misread. The hardest thing to do in a fight is nothing, and do it perfectly. Then came the thump of speed. The starboard J-16 dived shallow and went transonic. Shockwave rolling over the superstructure like a physical shove. Windows rattled. Coffee leapt. Sailors clenched railings but held posture. In the CIC, someone exhaled a laugh that wasn't humor, just adrenaline baking off. The bracket tightened. Port fighter widened his arc, then knifed inward to squeeze geometry. If they carried YJ-83 second, they were already within plausible launch. The Aegis computer drew silent solutions. which sails to wake, which bearings guaranteed a kill, which phasing minimized debris over friendly decks. Numbers were easy. Politics was not. Jamming spiked again. The destroyer's SLQ-32 answered with countermeasures, filters, deceptive returns, a shifting sandbar of false echoes. It was a chess match played at 450 knots, every move a dare. Show me your doctrine, I'll show you mine. Still, the captain refused the easy theater of rage. No warning shots, no lock beams. He let professionalism do what anger could not hold the line. The crew felt the decision like a load shared across 1,000 shoulders. Fear was present, but discipline was louder. When the starboard jet hauled vertical, the port wingman slid low across the wake, vapor pluming from his wingtips, canopy flashing like a blade. For a heartbeat, steel and jet were the only things that existed: the sea, the sky, and a choice. The destroyer kept course. The Americans documented everything, and the bracket, having proved its point, did not break the world yet. At 6:47 a.m., the horizon shimmered with something far more dangerous than fighters. A new contact bloomed on Aegis. Bigger, slower, undeniable. CIC operators didn't need to check the ID tables. The radar pulse signature was as distinct as a fingerprint. A Type 052D guided missile destroyer, Beijing's crown jewel. And it was closing fast. If the J-16 second were harassment, the 052D was escalation. Its Type 346 ampere phased array radar, notorious among U.S. crews, locked onto the John Paul Jones with the steady, confident hum of a predator. Within moments, the American destroyer was no longer just tracked. She was targeted. Almost on cue, 2 more J-16 seconds surged in from the mainland. Fresh fuel, fresh pilots, fresh aggression. They didn't circle cautiously like their predecessors. They came in hot, low, fast, impatient. The lead fighter dove to 200 feet, so close to the surface that sea spray misted across his canopy. At that height, the American destroyer filled every inch of his heads-up display. His wingman chose a riskier line. Instead of trailing the ship, he crossed the bow at barely 400 feet, afterburners igniting in a roar that drowned out bridge comms. The shockwave slammed into steel, rattling the mast, jarring bolts, making every sailor on deck feel the vibration in their chest. It wasn't just intimidation, it was a demonstration. You are boxed in, and boxed in they were. The J-16 second above, the destroyer ahead, sonar whispering of submarines below. The triangle of pressure was complete. Every move the Americans might make was mirrored by a counter. Every path of escape narrowed by design. In the CIC, displays glowed like a storm front. Airborne radars sweeping, jammers hissing, missile signatures probed and analyzed. The combat computer calculated timelines in brutal precision. At this range, if the 052D fired YJ-18 anti-ship missiles, impact would come in less than 90 seconds. If the J-16 second loosed their payloads, the timeline was even shorter. The tactical action officer hovered over the fire inhibit switch. 1,000 tons of steel and circuits stood ready. VLS cells packed with SM-2 second and ESSMs. CIWS mounts primed to spit tungsten walls. Everything was alive, but restrained. On deck, sailors braced against the salt wind, eyes fixed skyward as the fighters screamed overhead in alternating passes. Each roar louder than the last, each maneuver tighter, riskier, designed to drag nerves across raw edges. The crew didn't flinch. They couldn't. The captain had ordered calm, and calm was what they gave him, even as adrenaline burned through their veins. For the John Paul Jones, this was the knife's edge of naval diplomacy. To escalate meant war, to retreat meant humiliation. And so they held course straight, steady, deliberate. But everyone on board felt it. The margin for error was gone. One twitch, one flare, one nervous finger, and the strait would ignite. By 6:58 a.m., the harassment had peaked. The J-16 second no longer flew to impress cameras or to rattle nerves. They flew to push the John Paul Jones into a corner she could not escape. One fighter dropped to an illegal altitude of just 120 feet. its wingtips carving vapor trails as it skimmed so close to the waves that spray fanned behind it. It thundered barely 200 feet off the destroyer's port beam, every second a deliberate test of the American self-control. Simultaneously, another J-16 roared overhead at 300 feet, its radar locking solid onto the destroyer's hull. There was no pretense left. This wasn't observation, it was targeting. Ahead, the O-52D destroyer accelerated, white water boiling from her bow. She cut across the strait at 30 knots, completing the triangle with lethal geometry. Chinese warship ahead, fighters above, submarines lurking unseen below. The Americans were boxed inside a trap with no clean exit. In the CIC, the atmosphere thickened like storm air before a lightning strike. Alarms sang. The SLQ-32 filled the spectrum with hostile signatures. Both CIWS mounts spun up, Vulcan cannons whining as their barrels rotated into pre-fire RPM. Operators watched kill solutions stack on their screens. 17 simultaneous intercept paths, each one a clean shot, each one a potential trigger for catastrophe. The tactical action officer's hand hovered over the fire inhibit switch. He could feel the vibration of the cannons through the deck plates, the hum of missiles waiting in their launch cells. The Aegis computer whispered silent calculations: distance, closure, impact time. One click, one decision, and the next sound would not be alarms. It would be the thunder of missiles leaving their tubes. 5 seconds. That was all that stood between the Indo-Pacific and war. On deck, sailors felt it in their bones. Their destroyer was alive with energy, radars humming, guns primed, computers locked on, and still no order to fire. They looked skyward, eyes following the screaming fighter skimming the mast, knowing full well that if he loosed a missile at this range, there would be no second chances. The CIWS was their last wall, and its barrel spun like a growl waiting for a bite. Inside the cockpit of the lead J-16, green digits scrolled across the pilot's visor, range gates closing, firing solutions updating every fraction of a second. The temptation was there, the target fixed and glowing. He knew the Americans could kill him in a heartbeat, but only if they pulled the trigger first. And so he pushed closer, daring them, gambling with the silence of rules that chained both sides. 5 eternal seconds, then release. The J-16 second clawed skyward in vertical climbs, afterburners blazing. The O-52D eased her bow offline, throttling back into a shadowing posture. The trap dissolved as quickly as it had formed, leaving the John Paul Jones steaming forward, her engines steady, her crew wired with adrenaline and disbelief. They had survived, not because their weapons failed, but because they never fired. As the sun climbed higher over the Taiwan Strait, the echoes of jet thunder faded into the distance. The Chinese destroyer no longer charged, but shadowed from afar, her bow angled just enough to remind the Americans that she was still there. Above, the J-16 second dwindled into specks of silver, their vapor trails dissolving into the morning sky. On board the John Paul Jones, the CIC quieted, but the tension lingered like static after a storm. Sailors removed their headsets with hands that trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline refusing to fade. They had stood at the edge of war and had not crossed it, and that restraint had demanded more courage than any missile launch ever could. The captain sat in his chair, expression carved from stone, his silence heavier than any order. He knew what his crew had endured, 5 seconds in which history might have bent toward disaster. He also knew what they had achieved. The destroyer had sailed through, mission intact, without giving the enemy the excuse they had been baiting for. For every sailor, the lesson was unmistakable. In modern conflict, the first to fire may not be the victor. The true strength lies in control, in surviving the provocation without surrendering discipline. It is easy to unleash destruction. It takes far greater willpower to withhold it. As the John Paul Jones continued her transit at 18 knots, engine steady, wake trailing across contested waters, her message was written not in gunfire, but in resolve. We do not bend, and we do not break. The world would remember this standoff not for shots fired, but for the silence that held them back. And perhaps, for the deeper truth it revealed, sometimes the bravest warriors are not those who strike first, but those who refuse to. It's 2:34 PST, the 23rd of September 2025. 12 miles off Point Reyes, California, alarms rip through steel decks. USS Pennsylvania, an Ohio-class ballistic missile sub, snaps to battle stations. Sonar shows a second shadow at 200 meters depth, close enough to feel its screws. Not a ghost, an active Chinese Type 094 with 16 JL-3 tubes. On the plot, range 12.3 nautical miles from the coast, bearing steady, speed low, doors crack open, torpedo rooms flood, missile hatches slide. The water trembles. Pennsylvania counters quiet turns. Counterbearing, weapons warmed. Hydrophones across the coast confirm the track. Comms whisper to Pacific Fleet. Hostile posture. Deterrent procedure. In the black, the two hulls face each other like loaded springs. One click on the wrong circuit and the ocean becomes fire. Then a new sound. An English transmission from the Chinese boat conducting sonar tests. It keeps talking, rolling out technical jargon for minutes. The air feels thinner. Every sailor holds a breath as the clock crawls toward 3:41. The California coast looks calm. Fishing lights bobbing, container ships sliding south. Under that calm runs a hard truth. These lanes keep fuel, grain, electronics, and medicine moving. If they close, shelves thin, prices jump, and allies doubt who can still keep the sea open. That is why USS Pennsylvania patrols here, silent and unseen until tonight. The contact sits 12.3 nautical miles off Point Reyes, just outside the U.S. line. That distance is legal cover, but the message is blunt. We can park a nuclear trigger at your door. The intruder is a Type 094 Jin class with JL-3 SLBMs, long range, multiple warheads, minutes to hit U.S. cities. At 200 meters, its torpedo doors crack open and missile tubes flood. Those moves are signals, ready if you push us. For Washington, it's brinkmanship in home waters. For Beijing, it's leverage proof of reach, a bid to shape the next crisis before it starts. Pacific Fleet Command orders. Deter, document, don't shoot first. SOSUS hydrophones ashore triangulate the contact. Secure comms whisper updates. Pennsylvania edges to an offset angle, torpedoes warmed, countermeasures primed. One rash shot could light the fuse. Too soft a stance invites repeat visits. Inside the boat, calm voices ride the noise. The captain must choose, shadow quietly and gather proof, or go loud with an active ping that could spook the target and blow the standoff open. Then the Chinese sub transmits in English, claiming sonar tests, and keeps talking. 17 minutes of strange technical details spill into the water. Intel teams record every hertz. This could be the gold they need on JL-3 and Jin-class habits. Two nuclear boats now stare at each other within earshot of California. Your call from that control room. Press 1 to fire or 9 to hold. Drop your number below and follow for what comes next. 2:40. Pennsylvania's sonar locks in. Propeller cavitation, hull chatter, faint electrical hum signs of a big, quiet boat. The contact holds steady. The captain orders, prepare to engage, not fire. Sensors sharpen. 2:42. Pennsylvania slides into a shadow course, slow, silent. A hunter tracking a hunter. Passive listening keeps stealth. Torpedo tubes are loaded, but warheads stay safe. Every move is measured. 2:45. SOSUS arrays flash updates. Shore teams confirm depth and track. Pacific Fleet watches. Then the contact bursts speed and turns closer. That's no test, it's a probe. 2:48. Pennsylvania fires a warning, acoustic pings, and a mock target track. Message clear, we see you. Back off. Risky sound travels both ways. The Chinese sub answers with decoys and missile tube vents. 2:51. Sonar techs call range 1.2 nanometers. The captain orders evasive posture and countermeasures ready. The crew runs, drills drilled into muscle memory, calm hands, steady voices. 2:54. A new English transmission. Conducting sonar calibration. no hostile intent. But the tone feels off too formal, stuffed with technical jargon. It drags on, 17 minutes, as if probing patience. 2:56. Range flickers as the Jin adjusts trim, holding a launch-ready posture. Pennsylvania answers with a gentle S-turn, forcing an off angle. Helm whispers corrections. Engineering trims pumps to keep noise under the sea's hiss. 2:57. Pennsylvania shifts depth and bearing, opening space while covertly pushing a sensor tag closer. The tag records the sound of JL-3 launch tubes flooding. That signature is gold. 3-5. For minutes, both boats trade posture and signals. Weapons are armed, none fired. The Pacific holds its breath in radio static and ocean noise. 3-8. A freighter's screws rumble overhead, masking both subs. Neither captain moves. When the wake fades, the Chinese boat emits one thin ping, almost a goodbye, and slides south at 4 knots. 3:12. Finally, the intruder turns out, venting wake, slipping away, no clash. But America gains a trove of data acoustic prints, comm style, JL-3 behavior. Ashore, analysts will forge a fresh fingerprint and a playbook for the next time a Jin creeps this close. The battle tonight was fought in silence and won through what was learned. 3:20. The tension doesn't fade. Pennsylvania's crew stays at battle stations, tracking every faint echo. The Chinese sub pulls south, but sonar now shows smaller contacts, likely drones or decoys. Each one could hide a sudden turnback. 3:23. The captain orders a defensive weave. Pennsylvania shifts a few degrees, reducing her profile while keeping the intruder in reach. The move sharpens arcs for defense and keeps firing angles ready if torpedoes come. 3:27. Sonar teams filter the noise. Some returns vanish harmless bubbles. Others hold steady. The risk is clear. If one is real, it could close to lethal range in minutes. A wrong call means losing initiative. 3:31. The boat's Mark 48 torpedoes are primed, tubes hot, guidance aligned. The crew knows if orders come, there will be no warning. Shots, only kills. But restraint rules. Fleet command demands proof before action. 3:35. The Chinese sub reappears at 3 nanometers holding parallel course. Not retreating, pacing, shadowing like a duel. Posture, pure and raw, each side daring the other to move first. 3:40. Internal comms spark. Intel officers urge patience. Tacticians warn of encirclement. The captain balances both, eyes locked on sonar sweeps that could flip in seconds. 3:44. Suddenly, a high-pitched spike screams in headsets. One drone goes active, blasting pings. It's a provocation, forcing Pennsylvania's systems to adjust filters, burning seconds. Was this cover for a test, or just noise warfare? 3:47. The captain orders countermeasures streamed aft, a shield of acoustic confusion. It buys time but signals readiness. The control room falls to whispers. 3:50. The picture sharpens. A U.S. Ohio class and a Chinese Jin class circling off California, drones scattering noise between them. Both nuclear armed, both knowing one misread could tip into disaster. 3:53. A sudden thermal shift rolls across the layer. Ranges smear, bearings wobble. The captain holds course, trusting training over noise. Patience is armor when steel cannot speak. The clocks feel louder. The standoff no longer feels like defense, it feels like the edge of war. If you think Pennsylvania should strike first, press 1. If you believe holding steady avoids catastrophe, press 9, and subscribe to follow how this duel unfolds. 3:58. Just as both sides hold their nerve, sonar operators catch something new. Faint, at first fast, shallow contact skimming the surface. Not big subs, not decoys. These are smaller, quicker units. Autonomous undersea drones. 4. They move in tight packs, darting across bearings with unpredictable speed. Harder to track, harder to classify. If one packs explosives or advanced sensors, it could cripple stealth, and they're headed straight for Pennsylvania's position. 4-2. The crew switches tactics. Mark 48 are too heavy for such small targets. Instead, the captain calls for counter-drone responses, rapid noisemakers, and sharp maneuvering. Every adjustment is delicate. Too loud, and the Ohio's own location shines like a beacon. Too slow, and the drones close in. 4, 5. Sonar fills with static. 4, maybe 5 contacts slash through the water layer, forcing constant recalculations. The ship banks tighter, rudder angles sharp, ballast shifting. Inside, sailors grip consoles as the hull tilts. One drone streaks past the bow at under 200 meters, a reminder how thin the margin is. 4, 8. Then, the Chinese Jin-class shifts again, rising slightly as if to oversee the swarm. The message is unmistakable. Escalation. This isn't just a test anymore, it's a live demonstration of layered tactics, pairing a ballistic missile sub with fast autonomous hunters. 4-11. Pennsylvania responds. The crew launches a burst of deceptive noise, then a sudden dive. The sub sinks deeper, slipping beneath the swarm's layer, forcing drones to chase or lose contact. It's a gamble. The deeper you go, the narrower the escape. 4-14. The duel now shifts tone. This is no longer sub versus sub. It's old steel against new swarms, each move writing the playbook for wars yet to come. 4-18. Depth alarms echo as Pennsylvania steadies at 350 meters. The hull groans, but the dive shakes off 2 drones that can't track below the layer. 3 remain, darting close, their pings rattling through the control room. 4-21. The captain calls it engage counterattack. Mark 48 torpedoes are not aimed at the Jin class yet, but at the swarm. One fires, streaking ahead. A violent detonation erupts, water compresses, static roars, and 1 drone vanishes. 2 left. 4-24. The Chinese sub reacts, surging forward. Its screws churn, loud and defiant, as if daring Pennsylvania to strike directly. Sonar screams with overlapping noise, masking intentions. Was it moving to launch, or just posturing? Nobody knows. Seconds stretch into lifetimes. 4-27. A drone slips under Pennsylvania's keel. Depth charges could be in play. The captain orders a hard turn, ballast blowing fast. The boat tilts, metal shrieks. Sailors brace against bulkheads. The drone streaks past. Too late to adjust. Narrow escape. 4:30. Countermeasures blanket the water clouds of bubbles. Bursts of false echoes. The last drone slams into the confusion, chasing ghosts. The crew seizes the chance. One more torpedo launches, shredding the contact with a muffled boom. Silence returns. 4:34. Now only the Jin class remains. It's closer, less than 2 nanometers. Torpedo tube doors open again, a deadly mirror to Pennsylvania's own posture. 2 nuclear subs, each holding dozens of city-killing warheads, staring at each other point-blank in the dark. 4:38. The captain's knuckles whiten on the periscope handles. Orders hover between restraint and survival. Fire first, and history brands this night as the start of nuclear war. Hold back, and risk being the one caught unready. Every man in the control room feels the weight. 4:41. Then the Jin class blinks first. It screws slow, torpedo doors clank shut. It turns east, pulling away at measured speed. Pennsylvania shadows briefly, confirming retreat. Relief floods the compartment, but tension lingers. This duel was seconds from the unthinkable. Tonight, steel, training, and sheer nerve held the line. If you think the U.S. captain was right to hold fire, press 9. If you believe he should have struck first, press 1 and subscribe to follow how close we came to the edge. 4:50. Silence settles, but it's the heavy kind that lingers after danger passes. USS Pennsylvania holds position, sonar sweeping the emptiness where moments ago the Pacific was alive with hostile echoes. The Chinese Jin class is gone, but the tension it carried remains. What matters most is what the U.S. gained. Every second of the standoff poured acoustic signatures into recorders. Propeller tones, ballast shifts, the unique sound of JL-3 tubes flooding. Communications, logs, captured phrase, patterns, timing, even the rhythm of Chinese command structure. Intelligence gold. The Navy will study this night for years. For Beijing, the message was clear. They could bring nuclear firepower within sight of California. For Washington, the answer was sharper. America can detect, shadow, and confront without flinching, even at the razor's edge. Both sides walked away, but both know the next time may not end as quietly. Strategically, it proves two things. First, that China is willing to push SSBN patrols into U.S. waters, signaling resolve and testing response. Second, that America's SOSUS network and Ohio-class readiness still hold the line. It was deterrence by presence, and it worked, but only just. The world will never read the classified details. For most, this night will be a footnote. But for the men who stood in the control room, watching ranges shrink and timers tick, it was the moment they felt history leaning on their shoulders. America holds the advantage in intelligence, but the margin is thinner than it looks. Autonomous drones, close-in patrols, and deliberate provocations are rewriting undersea warfare. Next time, the swarm could be larger. Next time, missiles might rise. Tonight, Pennsylvania survived. The sea stayed open, but the balance grows more fragile by the day. If you believe the U.S. should answer stronger next time, press 1. If you think restraint is the only way to avoid disaster, press 9. And subscribe to follow how this undersea chess match unfolds. The South China Sea, the 19th of July, 2025. The ocean looked calm, almost serene, as if time itself had frozen. But on board the USS Argonne, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, the illusion shattered in an instant. Radar operators, eyes locked on their glowing screens, picked up a sudden, violent shift. A Chinese Type 052D destroyer, hull number 174, surged from 18 knots to 30-inch under 90 seconds. That wasn't routine. That was aggression. Beijing had flipped the switch. The order was clear. Intercept the Americans, force a reaction, and broadcast the confrontation for the world to see. But there was one problem. The Americans weren't trespassing. The strike group was sailing 185 nautical miles from Chinese shores, international waters, where $3.4 trillion in global trade flowed every single year. And the Argonne wasn't alone. She was part of the USS Ronald Reagan Strike Group, a shield built to protect the world's sea lanes. Destroyers, cruisers, and the mighty aircraft carrier itself formed a moving fortress, bristling with power. At 8:34, radar confirmed the worst. The Chinese destroyer was locked on a collision vector, weapons range in just 14 minutes. Below Argonne's decks, 122 vertical launch cells waited a storm of SM-6 missiles ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. But silence filled the Combat Information Center. On the flight deck of the Ronald Reagan, operations shifted like a machine built for war. Aircraft were armed, destroyers repositioned, and nearby merchant ships carrying billions in cargo looked to one thing for protection: the resolve of the U.S. Navy. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was provocation. And the world was about to witness the first move in a dangerous game. 8:37 hours. The tactical picture snapped into razor focus. Argonne's SPY-1 radar painted the Type 052D with unforgiving clarity hull lines, weapons mounts, even the jitter of her fiery control arrays. Bearing steady, speed high. Time to weapons range. Under 14 minutes if she kept her nose hot. If the destroyer fired YJ-1818 second, sea skimming and cruel, they closed the last stretch in less than 4 minutes. Argonne's kill chain was already built: sensors, processors, shooters, every link humming. The captain asked one word: intent? The tactical action officer didn't blink. Aggressive vector. Recommend general quarters. The captain's reply was colder than steel. Hold. Measure their nerve. Around the flagship, the strike group shifted like gears engaging. On Ronald Reagan's deck, yellow shirts choreographed aircraft with fingertip precision. Screws and McFall slid outward, forming a hard, overlapping shield. Overhead, an E-2D Hawkeye traced lazy circles at 25,000 feet, its radar combing the sky and sea into a single living map. New contacts bloomed. multiple fast movers pushing south off the Chinese carrier Shandong. JGO-15 second heavy, hungry, and climbing too slow. Ski jump launches meant trade-offs. Less fuel, fewer weapons, shorter legs. Still, they came, the first move in a Maneuver confrontation. Below the waves, something worse. Argon's sonar team rode the acoustic layer and caught a smear of noise. A diesel-L electric boat, likely a Type 039, moving too fast, too loud. At 80 nautical miles, she was already bleeding stealth, her signature smearing across the waterfall display like a confession. 41 merchant ships threaded the sea lanes nearby, hulls stacked with billions in cargo. The Americans adjusted their screen to keep commerce inside the umbrella. Steel guardians shepherding steel fortresses. Inside CIC, voices stayed level. Sectors assigned. Tracks correlated. Link 16 stitched every cockpit and bridge into one shared brain. No bravado, no wasted words. Just a calm that felt like a drawn bow. Across the line, the Chinese formation huddled tight line of sight calls, legacy radars, a fractured picture, predictable arcs, predictable mistakes. The clock kept eating distance. 13 minutes, 12, 11. The air boss cleared early launches. Cat crews snapped into rhythm, engines spooled. The storm was building quiet, disciplined, inevitable. 8:49 hours. The sky over the South China Sea hardened into a layered chessboard. AE-18E Super Hornets surged in. AESA cones sweeping arcs of air and sea. Link 16 fused cockpits and bridges into one mind. What one jet saw, all saw. Latency shaved to the bone. Then the quiet killers arrived. EAE-18 Graham Growlers slid on cold air. Alabama Q-99 pods whispering electricity. Chinese scopes flooded with ghosts. 4 contacts became 12, then 20, then none. Range 8 gate tricks and sidelobe spoofs multiplied targets, and JCHAS 15 pilots chased phantoms through static. Their locks slipped, their comms stuttered. The Americans spoke less and knew more. Altitude stacked like armor. High cover at 35,000 feet. Hunters at 25,000. Night fighters stalking at 15,000. Overlapping arcs erased blind spots and boxed the battle space. Across the line, the Chinese formation bunched tight, bound to line of sight calls and aging glass. Predictable vectors in a digital war invite a single end. Below, the ocean yielded a louder truth. A Type 039 crept too fast, too shallow. At 8:51, she raised her snorkel to breathe, and the sea answered with a shout. On Argon's waterfall display, the acoustic fingerprint bloomed range 15,000 yards. Course imperfect, fate precarious. If the balloon went up, an ASROC would be on her in seconds. Warhead and water hammer ending the guesswork. Merchant traffic threaded the lanes. 41 ships, billions in cargo, drawn safer under the American umbrella as the screen flexed and tightened. Controllers aboard Reagan parceled intercepts, fuel states, and time gone station with metronomic cadence. The battle now spanned air, surface, undersea, and the invisible spectrum. On each axis, initiative sat squarely with the strike group. The Chinese had sailed out to stage a spectacle. Instead, they found a storm already shaped around them, a fight defined by bandwidth, patience, and posture, rather than noise. The cameras would capture jets and wakes. The truth was numbers, timing, and trust. If disciplined networks dominate, press 1. If raw aggression can still break through, press 9. Comment your number and subscribe to stay on station. 8:56 hours. Inside Argon CIC, the calm thinned to a blade. Console glow washed across focused faces as the plot tightened. The Chinese destroyer had shifted from broad search to fire control track. It wasn't subtle. It was the digital equivalent of pressing a loaded pistol to the carrier's chest. Beams pinned Ronald Reagan in a cold, invisible grip. Firing solutions rolled and refreshed. SM-2 and SM-6 assignments populated in crisp columns. Operators called bearings and ranges in clipped voices, while reporters captured every microsecond of hostile lock. Frequency, pulse width, dwell time, doctrine held, hold fire, measure intent. Build the case. Do not give the first shot away. On deck, the carrier's rhythm never faltered. Ordnance crews moved with quiet economy. Yellow shirts carved pathways through jet exhaust and heat haze. Out on the ring, McFarland screws tightened the wall, their Aegis umbrellas overlapping until the sea itself felt roofed in steel. Then the snap. A J-15 broke formation, rolled and dove across a Hornet's nose in a thumping pass meant to rattle nerves and cameras. The American pilot didn't flinch. He inverted, slid behind the intruder, and let the tone sing in his headset 3 clean seconds of lethal certainty. One squeeze and the sky would write a different story. He didn't pull. Restraint isn't the absence of power, it's mastery of it. The J-15 yanked away, gamble spent. In CIC, heartbeat slowed by will alone. The logbook gained another page of proof. Aggression documented, escalation contained. For sailors watching from catwalks and hatches, the lesson was tactile. Strength was the held shot, the recorded lock, the formation that never blinked. The ocean waited, vast and indifferent, as men and machines threaded a line thinner than a wake. Controllers updated fuel states, lanes for recovery, and traps for contingencies. The group breathed as one organism, sensors and steel, doctrine and discipline holding a door open for peace without stepping back from it. In that moment, who truly won? If you believe discipline under fire is real victory, press 1. If you think bold provocation should rule, press 9. Comment your choice and subscribe to follow the next move. 9:03 hours. The Chinese believed they had set the tempo. They hadn't. From the deep, dark water west of the standoff, a Virginia-class attack submarine began to rise. For 8 days, she had shadowed the Shandong strike group without a breath of giveaway noise, mapping bearings, fuel states, and routine like a patient hunter memorizing a heartbeat. Now she surfaced by choice. Inside 6 nautical miles of the Chinese carrier, the sight landed like a verdict. A 7,900-ton shape broke the skin of the sea, black hull sluiced with foam, sail glistening, hatches sealed and inscrutable. Tubes and missiles were not on display. They didn't have to be. Presence did the speaking. For less than 2 minutes, she stayed there long enough for bridge wings to raise binoculars, long enough for phones to capture frames that would never make official news, long enough to make every officer understand the past week in a single breath. No radio call, no signal lamp. The message was the quiet itself. We were always here. If this were war, you'd be gone already. On Shandong's flag bridge, the calculus shifted. Their destroyer had painted an American carrier with fire control energy and found only documentation in return. Their JO-15 second had rushed south with cameras watching, burning fuel to climb, and losing options with every minute. Their diesel-electric boat had snorkeled under a watchful ear and been held at arm's length by people who never needed to announce it. And now this proof of proximity, proof of patience, proof of overmatch expressed without a trigger pull. Above, the JO-15 second circled on fumes. Skyjump launches had bought takeoff and sold endurance, and the bill had come due. They turned away one by one, defensive now, falling back toward the carrier's orbit. Across the box, Super Hornets held altitude blocks and tidy geometry, weapons safed, tone discipline unbroken. Merchant traffic threaded the lanes as the American screen flexed to keep commerce beneath its canopy. The carrier's cycle ticked on recovery's plan. Fuel ladders briefed, traps scheduled, while the submarine eased her ballast and slid back under the glare. Absence became louder than any broadside. By 9:23, Shandong herself began to withdraw. The official line would read, "Exercise complete." The unwritten truth traveled farther. In a contest measured by nerve, timing, and information, the quiet move had ended the argument. 9:30 hours. The sea lane stretched wide again, but no one aboard mistook it for peace. Calm after tension is never the same as calm before it. The Shandong strike group turned north, throttles eased, official channels declaring their exercise concluded. Yet for every sailor who had seen the spectacle unfold, the truth needed no communique. They had been out, watched, outflown, outmaneuvered, and outweighted. No missile had left its cell. No trigger had been pulled. Yet the ledger was heavy with evidence. Screens full of fire control locks, sonar tracks of a diesel boat gasping for air, radar plots of jets clawing sky with empty tanks, and above all, the memory of a submarine rising from nowhere only to vanish again. All recorded, all undeniable. The Americans had not simply shown weapons, they had shown discipline, the calm to absorb provocation, the patience to let the world see, the restraint to demonstrate strength without fire. This was not weakness. It was overmatch, disguised as stillness, dominance written in withheld shots, confidence spoken in silence. For the 41 merchant ships that crossed that corridor, carrying billions in trade, the difference was felt in cargo delivered, crews unshaken, schedules unbroken. For the region, the message was sharper. Stability does not come from bluster, but from the quiet edge of readiness. By day's end, the waters looked empty. But emptiness deceives. Somewhere under that expanse, attack boats moved unheard. Somewhere above, surveillance aircraft carved patient loops. Somewhere across the fleet, operators logged each second into archives that would later brief policymakers and allies alike. The record mattered. The restraint mattered more. Superpower is not measured by volume. It is measured by how quietly you can win without firing a shot. The United States Navy had preserved peace, not by stepping back, but by standing steady, holding open the door without letting it swing. And in that silence lies the lesson. True strength is not in the noise of weapons, but in the discipline to control them. It's 8 on the 25th of September 2025. In the South China Sea, near Woody Island, the USS Barry detected multiple fast-moving contacts. Alarms scream. Red lights flood the ship as sailors sprint to battle stations. Outside, the sea is calm until streaks of fire slice the horizon. 12 YJ-12 anti-ship missiles race in, skimming the waves to hide from radar. On the bridge, voices clash. Tracks confirmed closing fast. The captain's orders cut through. Hard turn to port. Launch interceptors. Deploy decoys. In Combat Information Center, screens overflow with arrows and timers. Vampires inbound. A watchstander calls the Navy's word for incoming missiles. Guns spin up, cells open, generators surge. Nearby, a U.S. oiler rides heavy and slow. Barry shifts to shield it, knifing through the swell to face the threat. Flight time is counted in seconds. The horizon flashes again. The first wave crosses the last mile. This is no drill. The next moments decide who survives. In the South China Sea, trade lanes run like arteries. Each day, tankers and container ships move fuel, food, and electronics that keep homes lit and stores stocked. The USS Barry is here to guard one of those lines. Alongside it sails a U.S. oiler, slow, heavy, essential, unprotected. It's a floating jackpot for anyone wanting to send a message. For Washington, open water means credibility and calm markets. If America falters, insurers raise rates, captains reroute, and prices climb at home. Allies watch every move. Some hedge the moment sea lanes look uncertain. For Beijing, pushing U.S. ships back from Woody Island is about control. Runways, radars, and missile sites there are meant to turn the island into a lock on the map, a place where Chinese forces set the rules and others comply. The morning breaks when a Chinese destroyer fires a dozen YJ-12 at the American oiler. The message is plain: your shield won't hold. Barry's mission flips from presence to protection in one breath. If the destroyer's strike lands, a tanker burns, crews die, and the busiest route in Asia looks easy to close. If Barry blocks it, the signal reverses. U.S. ships can still take a punch and keep the sea open. The oiler matters because it feeds the fleet. Lose it and sorties drop, patrols shrink, and commanders start saying no to risks. That is how a single hit becomes a strategic bruise that lingers. Both captains stare at the same horizon and see different futures. One sees open seas and steady trade. The other sees a tightening ring of control. The gap between those visions is where missiles fly and reputations break. Comment below. Press 1 if the US must hold the line, or press 9 if China's challenge will break through. 8:10. The crew braces as alarms pulse. On radar, 12 inbound tracks grow closer, closing distance at nearly Mach 3. The Combat Information Center runs hot, every second shaped by voices calling bearings and ranges. The captain wastes no time. Launch interceptors. Vertical launch cells slam open. The first salvo of SM-2 missiles roars skyward, leaving smoke trails across the blue. They climb, curve, and dive, hunting the incoming YJ-12. Seconds matter. The first American missiles meet the wave midair. Explosions crack like thunder miles away. 2, then 3 enemy tracks vanish, but 9 remain, still slicing toward the oiler. The captain orders the ship's electronic warfare team into action. EA-18G Growlers overhead sweep the sky with jamming signals, scrambling missile seekers. Decoys fire from Barry's launchers, bright flares, and chaff clouds, buying precious seconds. 8-12. The next layer activates. Barry fires another salvo, this time Standard Missile 6 interceptors longer reach, faster kill. 4 streak into the sky. 1 finds its target, detonating a YJ-12 mid-arc. Another clips 1 near the wave tops. Still, several push through the defenses, hugging the sea to stay hidden until the last mile. The Oilers crew watches helplessly from the deck. They know their ship is no warship, slow, soft-skinned, carrying millions of gallons of jet fuel. If 1 missile gets through, the ship could vanish in fire. Barry maneuvers hard, its hull shuddering as it turns to cut angles for its defense systems. Close-in weapons ready, the captain calls. Phalanx CIWS guns' last resort defenses begin spinning, barrels humming at 4,500 rounds per minute. The horizon flashes again. 3 missiles left. Their engines glow orange, skimming the waves at blistering speed. Barry's crew has no room for error now. The sky is streaked with contrails, smoke, and scattered fireballs. The sea below is littered with debris. Radios crackle as nearby U.S. aircraft report hits, their jamming runs disrupting several seekers just in time. But the engagement is not over. Even as explosions echo across the horizon, the remaining warheads are seconds away. The Americans have slowed the storm, but they haven't stopped it yet. 8-14. The last defenses grind into action. 3 YJ-12 remain, streaking low, their warheads locked on the American ships. Barry's guns thunder, the ship rolling slightly as gunners adjust angles for a clear shot. 1 missile breaks apart under a storm of 20mm rounds, fragments splashing harmlessly into the sea. The crew cheers for half a second, then braces again. 2 more are still closing. Electronic warfare operators push systems to the limit, flooding the air with noise, trying to blind the seekers. The ship turns 5 more degrees, reducing its profile, buying fractions of a second. The oiler continues straight, too heavy to dodge, relying completely on Barry's shield. On its deck, sailors crouch and pray, watching tracers light the horizon. 8-15. The second missile dives. CIWS barrels blaze, spitting fire. Shells cut through the air, sparks flash. Then a fireball erupts as another YJ-12 is torn apart. The blast rattles the oiler's hull. Still, 1 missile survives, skimming barely above the waves, seconds from impact. Barry's systems lock on. The ship shakes as it turns, engines straining. Decoys fire again, drifting into the path, but the missile ignores them. The captain shouts, "All guns engage!" The last CIWS opens up, white-hot tracers cutting across the water. The missile swerves, confused, and the crew's hearts freeze. Damage control teams crouch by hatchways with hoses and foam, ready to fight, fire, or seal a breach. Medics stage stretchers in the passageway. In the oiler's engine room, the chief trims pumps to cut pressure 1 hedge against a fuel-fed inferno. Overhead, Growlers hold a final jamming run in reserve. A calm voice checks in on the net and steadies the bridge. The destroyer's deck reeks of cordite. Brass casings clatter at the crew's boots. Everyone holds their breath. For 30 seconds, time bends. The destroyer's men and women are stretched to the limit, every eye locked on a single burning dot racing across the surface. This is the moment that defines the fight. Either America proves its shield holds, or China proves it can break through. Comment below, press 1 if you believe Barry's crew will stop the last missile, or press 9 if China's strike will hit home. The fate of 2 ships, and the story of this battle, hangs on seconds. 8-18. The horizon falls silent for a moment. The last YJ-12 explodes in a spray of fire and seawater. Sailors on Barry exhale, some gripping rails with shaking hands. But silence doesn't last. New radar tracks bloom low, fast, and numerous. This time, it's not missiles, it's fighters. J-11 and J-16 roar off Woody Island, carrying bombs and anti-radar missiles. Their path curves low to stay hidden. Barry's operators call them out bogies inbound, bearing 120, range 60 miles. The destroyer has seconds to react. The oiler cannot run. The twist is clear. These jets are not just striking ships, they're hunting radars. Without sensors, Barry is blind. The crew shifts frequencies, switches modes, trying to keep systems alive. Growlers dive in, jamming enemy signals. But the fighters press forward, dropping decoys. The sky fills with false echoes and confusion. The captain faces a dilemma. Fire off missiles now, or save them for another hidden wave of YJ-12. One wrong choice means disaster. Barry fires SM-6 upward, trails carving arcs across the sky. Explosions mark 2 kills. Yet more aircraft advance, releasing glide bombs. Guns rattle, shockwaves ripple across the deck. The fight has changed. Missiles were fast, but fighters adapt mid-run. Every sailor knows, if one anti-radar missile lands, Barry's defenses collapse, and the oiler becomes a burning wreck. This is no longer just defense, it is survival in real time.